Welcome to the Sunday Show. It's the show that's on Sundays. I'm your host, Forrest Valkai, and I'm joined today by Erika, my dear sweet friend. How are you today?
You know what? I'm feeling great. I'm hydrated. I'm definitely not hungover from Halloween, so I'm psyched to be here. I'm ready to take calls. As I said to Forrest, I'm feeling fighty. I'm feeling like ready to get into some blood sports, as we like to do here on the line. And you're coming to us on a special day where me and Forrest are hosting a show with a limited runtime. So
it's weird.
What are we to do?
I don't know why they made this decision. We have a hard cutoff today at 4:00, so 2 hours. We have we as close as we can to 2 hours is how far we have to run the show, and that is because at the end of this show we're going to be playing a video from Humanist for Harris featuring awesome people like Andrew Seidel and Hemant Mehta and Jamie Raskin and Sarah Levin. Watch it after the end of the show and push all the buttons, all the links down in the description. Christian nationalism is on the ballot again. And only worse this time, back with a stinking vengeance. So please watch that video to learn what you can do to help abate the rise of fascism in this country. We're going to try to do as many calls as we possibly can in the limited time that we can. Theists, this is your chance to call in and talk to us. You've got two biologists here, two people who give a shit about the history of the world and the things that have lived in it. This is your chance to actually argue with people who know what they're talking about evolution, about creationism, about the age of the earth, about radiometric dating, about cell theory, about the shape of the planet, about sex and gender, about whatever other weird fucking conspiracy theory you've got going on. This is your time to talk to people and actually have a real sincere conversation, not just a name-calling match in a comment section on Instagram. And I say that specifically because holy fuck, the amount of people on my Instagram that tell me that they can beat me in a debate that will not call in make me sad. We have a whole show. So call in at the bottom of the screen, 720-619-2288, or use the web link in the description to call in over them internets. Erika, you look like you have something to say.
How many people out there that you disagree with have like not even an annual, like a bi-monthly or monthly show appearance where they show up and you can call in and tell them why you disagree with them so much, and they have to answer the call and argue with you in front of an audience. Like this is the golden opportunity for people like this, and I antagonize them consistently on Twitter because dreadfully I'm still on that platform, and they never show up, even though I ask them to. And you guys know I ask nicely. That's completely my MO, but they're never here. So whatever.
They're never here. And it does blow, because like really, you like on a show like this, we can't prepare. We don't know who's going to call in. We don't know what they're calling in for. Imagine you get into a debate where your opponent is not allowed to prepare or even know it's happening until it happens. Like, oh my glob, it's on a silver platter, y'all, and it still just goes poorly every time. So we're gonna do what we can with what we can. If you're an atheist and you want to call in, maybe think about it, because we're gonna try to be focusing on theist calls, and like we said, we only got 2 hours to go with. So if you're an atheist caller, I see we already have a couple on the line. I'm sorry if we don't get to you. We're gonna try our best. But we're definitely prioritizing theist calls as always, but now more than ever, because we got a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. And with that, we're 5 minutes into the show. We're going to get started. You cool with that?
Oh, dude, we're killing it. We are getting two things quickly. Someone in the comment section was like, Forrest and Erika, speed run. That's the vibe I'm trying to embody this afternoon.
Yes, it's going to be fast. It's going to be weird. It's going to be great. We're going to start off with Max. I was going to say start off strong, but I don't know, because I hear this person's a repeat caller, and who knows how far we've come with this person. I don't know if I've talked to him or not. We got Max, pronouns he, him, calling in from Itchy Legs, that's got to be rough, who says that he has mathematical proof to show that atheism is illogical. Neither one of us are mathematicians. Let's see. All right, Max, you're on the line with Forrest and Erika. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Good day to you guys. And
Hello.
here is my proof. It is better to believe in God than not to, because if you believe, then you risk infinite reward while committing finite resources. Whereas if you don't believe, you're risking infinite penalty and finite resource
Okay,
gain.
so it's
So
I brought out my whiteboard. I was ready to take notes, and it's just Pascal's wager. Okay.
So let me explain. Any way you look at it,
Do you need to?
it's better to just pick a religion and stick to it, hoping it's the right one. And specifically, I have narrowed it down to either Christianity or Islam, because other religions, they, in Judaism, hell is not infinite. So if you don't believe, if you don't want to get circumcised, it's fine. You at the end of times, you're fine. Same with
Max.
Buddhism.
I'm going to be just super honest with you. I'm sorry. Do you have anything that isn't just Pascal's wager? Because if that's what we're arguing with, I'd like to just get into it rather than hearing all these justifications for all these other religions.
Yeah,
like,
go ahead.
Is it just Pascal's wager? Is that what we're doing?
Okay, sure. It is Pascal's wager. But can you prove that I'm wrong with this?
Very yes. It's really easy to get through Pascal's wager. Number one, you're talking about Christianity as like one of the main things you're talking about. There's over 40,000 denominations of Christianity. So pick one and you're probably wrong. Like I think it was Bertrand Russell who said, even if we can be sure that one of these religions is right, everyone should expect damnation as a matter of probability alone. You're calling it about mathematics. You've lost the game in terms of mathematics. It's over for you. You should expect to be wrong because there's so many different versions of just the one religion you're talking about, and you're going to throw on Islam as well. Way more. You're blowing it. Plus, it fundamentally comes down to the idea that you can like logically pull one over on this infinitely intelligent being. That you have this guy that made the universe that has superpowers that can read your mind and your thoughts, and you're gonna get this dude in a redundant trap of like technicality and win your way into paradise. Dumb. That doesn't make any sense either. Furthermore, wouldn't a god be nicer to people who didn't believe in them because of the evidence that we just didn't have a reason to believe in her, and we just didn't have a reason to stick with her, and we didn't like what she said, and we didn't, and that's why we didn't get that? What, don't you think that she would be nicer to us than someone who is a complete fucking hypocrite and just picked the probabilistic answer and didn't actually care whether or not the thing was true, didn't actually follow the teachings or anything like that, didn't actually have a sincere belief about anything, just like, well, I guess this works for me. There's so many reasons why this is a terrible argument, and it's bizarre to me that you're calling it a mathematical proof when you really just mean probability. What it doesn't matter. Erika, you got something else?
Okay, can I respond?
Yeah,
to your point?
Let me add something real quick here. I really don't have much to say because Forrest covered most of it. I mean, Pascal's wager, it's like, all right, yeah, that works if it's black or white. The one, you're already assuming that it's the one true correct religion over everything else. But Forrest already did that. I also want to mention too that really this game of pros and cons only works if the life that you're living now, right? The one where it's like involves quite a bit of deprivation and restraint and things of that nature. You're still getting a massive penalty if you're wrong from like an atheistic perspective or an agnostic or an irreligious perspective, because it's like if you do live the life that is sort of under all of these restraints, under all of these demands of a religion that may or may not be correct, and then this is all you get, don't you stand to lose everything as well?
Okay, so you guys brought up 4 points. Let me just address them in order. First,
Sure.
Forrest, you said that that there are many choices, right? Many combinations, each of which may be right. As I said, some of the choices are, definitely sending you to hell forever. Others for a time. So, if you just stick with one, it's still a better chance than being condemned forever because you don't believe. It's better than picking the wrong one, or it's
Unless
better
what
to
Erika
pick
said is
the
true.
one.
Yeah, because I
Unless
mean,
what
if
Erika said is
it's
true,
that,
okay.
yeah, Max, if it's that
So-
versus an atheistic perspective, then you're living a life of restraint. you're living a life of, underneath this set of rules that you may or may not agree with. And for, some groups of people, that's going to be significantly worse than for others. So for instance, in highly patriarchal religion, that's going to suck for women. You're basically throwing away the one shot that you have of being alive, being conscious, engaging with the world, and you're throwing that all away for the possibility of something after. It's like, if you're wrong, you don't stand to lose everything. You did lose everything, right? At least from my perspective. So I don't find that to be particularly compelling. And that's assuming that you've narrowed it down to the correct religion versus nothing, right? If you've got that narrowed down, and that is a massive assumption.
Let me respond to that. In some versions of Christianity, at your deathbed, you can accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and still get into heaven. So even if you lived a whole life of not following the religion, living in degeneracy, living in sin, if before you die, you do these certain actions, then you're fine. Similarly, if you're like living your whole life not being a Muslim, you can just say at the end, at your deathbed, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and that still covers it. So maybe it doesn't work like
then
you
why
say.
not do that? Then why not do that? Why not live however you want, and then at your deathbed, you're not even, I would say flip a coin, but it's not even that. You're rolling a 40,000 sided dice, and maybe you land on the right one.
Print off a list of all of the different religions that you could cover your ass for at the very end, and then just like stand up there like, okay,
once.
Yeah, it's like before I really get here, go down the list, like.
Yeah.
Well, before this calling in, I specifically looked up, Buddhism, Hinduism. There's no concept of hell. You're just reborn, so you can omit those.
Didn't say that.
In Greek and pagan religions, they don't judge people on faith but on actions, so you can omit those.
Yeah, we haven't been talking about that. We're talking just about Christianity and Islam here so far, as I know.
Just cover your ass for the ones that are going to say, like,
yeah,
if I don't have to worry about Buddhism or Hinduism, then I won't.
Say it again?
I said, if I don't have to cover my ass with, like, Hinduism and Buddhism and Raelism or whatever, like all of these sort of more obscure, what we would consider cults today, it's like, if I don't have to worry about those, if I'm covered anyways just by trying my best to be a good person, then that's not going to make my 40,000 confessions list on my deathbed. I'm just going to put the ones that I need to cover myself for.
And
again, like I just Forrest said this earlier, but sort of double down, like, do you really think the deity in question, God or some other, depending on which one you're going through, again, like some of these absurd cults, do you think that's going to pull one over on them? Like, do you think they're going to be like, man, I almost had him, but then at the end, while he was, choking on his own saliva, about to be pulled off life support, he was like, going down the list. Like, now he gets in.
Just demands worship. God just demands worship. So, you can be late, and then, maybe he'll let you in. Maybe he'll be like, that doesn't count, but it's still better to cover all your bases, right?
40,000 of them.
Is there 40,000 variations of Christianity and Islam? I don't think so.
There's over 40,000 denominations of Christianity alone. I don't know how many there are in Islam. I know of
really?
Two major
name
ones.
Them all.
What a stupid thing to demand of me. Well, are you serious?
Sorry, Forrest, you like women? Name every woman.
Name every woman.
But I'm saying there's like 9 major denominations.
Just pretend for a second that I actually could. Like, that would be the show. What a dumb thing to say. To name them all. Good gravy, dude.
Okay, hold on. Wait, Max, if that's all you're calling in to say, right? Like, and I'm not trying to mean this in like a combative way, but like, if all you're trying to say is, I think that if you don't buy any religion, that you should have a running list of religions that you can and should cover your bases for before you die, and you want to have that list, that scroll, that papyrus scroll in your closet somewhere to pull out at some point before you bite it, just so you can check it off, and God says, okay, I feel worshipped by this mortal, they can come in, they're good to go. Like, I don't really know what to say to that. Sure, if you want to cover your bases like that, go for it, right? I think that that's going to eat out a solid chunk of my time, my limited time on this earth. So I'm probably not going to do it, because I don't think that all of those denominations, religions, whatever, have the same, likelihood. And I don't think it's worth even covering my basis for it, right? I mean, like I could make up a religion on the spot and say, if you confess to my religion now, you make it into heaven. And from your logic, you could say, well, shit, maybe I should cover my bases on that one, just in case she's right with this religion she made up on the
But
spot.
you just made it on the spot. You just made it on the spot.
Yeah.
So I know it's not true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly. But there are many religions that I feel like you can check that off. You see what I mean?
She made it up on the spot, exactly like Joseph Smith or Muhammad or any of the other prophets of all these big religions who just said a random thing, and then millions of people followed it after that. So how do you know it wasn't divine revelation that she had? How do you know that God herself did not come down and speak directly to Erika and put an idea in her brain and she communicated it to you?
Well, look, the question of believing the claim of those religions.
I'm getting a vibe right now. The actual deity is like a large gibbon, right? And she's quite powerful. She's actually been secretly influencing society to sort of reach this point, and specifically to I am her emissary. That's why I'm here on the internet. She's been waiting for me to have this level of influence to reach this amount of people, and she's actually hooting and hollering down to me, through the wavelengths of my brain now, to tell all of you out there that if you confess to gibbonology now, you're good. You're going to make it into heaven. Like, I'm being told that right now. It's being like, wow, this is crazy. It's so convenient. And for this conversation, how appropriate, right? So it's like,
if you take
why
it
would
seriously
you
enough, maybe in 500 years, that will be its own thing. And then in 500 years,
your soul won't be saved in 500 years. You need your soul saved today by the great gibbon in the sky.
It's more like this, Max. Cover your bases, right? Like, it sounds crazy. It sounds goofy what I've just said to you, but all you have to do is say, I accept gibbonology, and you're saved. You're good. Like, why wouldn't you just say that if that's all you have to do?
You also have to do the thing I'm doing.
Invented
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. You just invented it, and these religions are ancient. So we don't know for sure if they were just invented by someone or not, right? So it's better to cover our bases.
You don't know for sure that what I just said isn't true. Like, what I mean, clearly I'm being tongue in cheek, right? But if many people across the United States, across the world today, Max, do feel as though they are this emissary all of a sudden of, alien cult religions or a different version of an existing religion or whatever, and they feel that they've received divine revelation, right? These are oftentimes doomsday cults, but not always. And they feel that they have to get that off their chest. Truly, they believe it. They're not being tongue in cheek like I was. So it's like, why do you not offer them the same sort of cover your bases, check and balance, I guess, that you want to allot to all of these other religions?
The reason for that is because, for example, in Christianity, there's like miracles that are tested to, and we can debate, the veracity of these claims and stuff. But these people, they're not providing these, miracles. They're not producing them. Joseph Smith is not producing, or I'm not heard of him, performing any miracles. I'm not heard of Muhammad, for example.
Joseph Smith read golden tablets out of a hat with a magic rock. He definitely performed miracles, and millions of Mormons believe it.
There are people right now, Max, in various, revivalist or Pentecostal churches. I'm probably, being overly simplistic with that. Right now, who are getting bitten by snakes and surviving the poison, or performing miracle healings by people who genuinely say that they've been cured of this or that or the other thing. It's like they're making the claims. You don't believe them because you're contemporaneous with them, and you're like, that sounds like it's fake to me. And no doubt there were people in the past who, when they heard of miracles that were performed, they sat back and they said, I don't buy that because it sounds fake to me. The only difference is that you're seeing it in the present and you're allotting some higher status to events that happened in the past because you can afford to be a little bit more, it feels less incredulous to you because you're not observing it with your own two eyes. And I just, to me, I don't find that. Yeah, but I don't find that compelling.
It's about probability. Like, there's a probability that I'm wrong. There's a probability. But it's going to cost a lot in the long run.
Probably right when it's old.
I cannot verify it with me being there in time, right? Like, I wasn't there.
I'm asking you, how is it more? How is how is Christianity or Islam more probably true because they're old? How does age affect probability of truth?
Because I wasn't there to verify it, to
You weren't
know
there
people.
to see Joseph Smith.
Yeah, but there were people closer to me in time who were, and who didn't believe him, right?
And
Like,
because
someone-
of that, there are millions of people now who do believe him. And there were people that were further from you in time, back in Jesus and Muhammad's days, that didn't believe them either. And now millions of people do. What's the difference? Why does it get better when it's
a
older?
different thing.
How long
Because
ago would Erika have had to have told you about the great gibbon in the sky before you believed her?
First of all, she would have to write a book, and she would have to have like followers who attested to that. That she's what she says she is.
I got it. So I'm
and
on
to
it. Hold
perform
on.
miracles.
Actually, I'm
And
getting
to perform
another
miracles
signal
that
now.
are recorded.
I'm getting another signal now. Forrest is actually another of her prophets, the great Hylobades in the sky. And I'm getting this signal that he's actually being compelled now to write down some of the great truths of gibbonology. I can't prove this, but I don't know, Forrest, are you feeling anything?
Exactly.
Are you almost hearing like the hooting and hollering?
I'm definitely feeling it. I'm definitely feeling it. This is it. I wrote a book and it's old, and we've got followers now. The Gibbon be realio, it's written in the sacred texts of expoology.
And there are people in the chat saying that they believe in gibbonology. So I kind of feel like
the chat is saying they believe she's right.
Followers in time, we have it now. So like when is it old enough for
and we have prophecy?
Okay, so you have the miracles. You have Forrest. Okay, Forrest just needs to go be persecuted for his belief and to die on a cross.
Dude, Max, I fucking promise you, if I go out and say this shit publicly, I will be persecuted for that belief. I guarantee it. So like that's a thing. Also, you said I have to die on a cross. When exactly did any of the other religious figures die on a cross? Like when did Muhammad die on a cross? When did Joseph Smith die on a cross? When did Buddha die on a cross? When did any of those things happen?
They didn't, but Jesus Christ did, and also Muhammad.
But you
that's
said
why it's less likely.
Muhammad didn't die on a cross.
I know. That's why I'm saying he didn't perform miracles, and he didn't die for his beliefs like that. So it's less likely.
He did perform miracles.
Christianity.
He did perform miracles.
No.
He split the moon in half, and he flew to heaven on a winged horse.
That's nonsense.
Yes, I do. But like that's what you're saying.
Wait. Yeah, hold on. How do you know that's nonsense, Max?
The moon is still there. The moon is still there.
It was healed by magic. The same magic that split it, God fixed it. Prove it didn't.
But
is that in the Quran?
Currently people can't be healed from their blindness with, spoken word. They can't be told to walk, even though they were previously disabled and unable to, right? Like, that's kind of the point of a miracle, right? Is that it defies the natural. It is supernatural. So no miracle has ever happened. So like, where do you draw the line? When does it become a miracle to you? When does it become plausible?
Look, obviously I cannot be 100% sure about it, but there's like a certain band of probability that, will convince me of something. And especially when talking about Pascal's wager, it's probable enough that it is worth to sacrifice a little bit of resources to gamble on it being true.
But the point is, we keep trying to drive home to you, Max, is that you are picking something completely arbitrarily to say this one is the most likely to probably be true. You're using illogical arguments and logical fallacies to decide which religion you think is most likely to be true for you to make this gamble on. And there's plenty, thousands, tens of thousands of other options out there that are equally as likely and equally as valid and equally as sound and equally nonsensical as other religion that you're picking right now. So for you to sit here and say, I'm going to believe it just in case, you still haven't gotten past the very first hurdle that we threw up, which is why are you picking this one particular thing just in case? Even if you just pick Christianity, there's over 40,000 denominations of that alone. So you can't even get out of the one religion.
Okay, let me explain again. What I said in the beginning is that out of all the ones that I have looked through, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, even like some sect of universalism, right? All of them don't contain hell where you will burn for eternity.
We're
Judaism
not,
doesn't.
and I didn't mention them in what I just presented to you. You keep bringing up hell as your justification. I haven't mentioned a religion without a hell yet. I've only brought up Christianity and Islam and Mormonism. So, like, just in Christianity, you have over 40,000 different flavors to choose from, many of which contradict one another and believe the other ones are going to hell. Why did you pick the one you picked? Which is the one that you did pick? How did you justify not believing in all the other ones? How are you protecting yourself from all the other ones that say that if you believe any of the other ones that you're going to hell, even if it's just this matter of whatever? How did you do it? Explain your thought process for all 40,000 different kinds of Christianity.
So at least one I removed, which is universalism, which says that there is no hell. So I can disregard that. Second,
there are plenty that say there's no hell. So
right?
Fuck them. Get rid of them.
Okay, so we can remove even more. But
sure,
you got to think about which is the easiest. Like some of them maybe you cannot eat meat on Fridays or Thursdays. Like I'm not about that. Others, which say
okay, so it is just
like a lot of good works.
But what if that one's right?
They're all equally likely.
What if that's the correct one?
All of them can have the same probability, according to you, of being the correct one. So it doesn't really matter. It's like the Monty Hall problem. Like behind 3 doors, behind 40,000 doors, there's one goat. And then you pick one, and then, and then
it is just your comfort and your religion and in your cultural preference. That's what it is. You pick something that sounds nice to you and it's easy, and you're gonna just decide on that.
Well,
what a wonderful! And then you're gonna call us and talk to us about logic. Good gravy, dude.
Well, Erika, and I think what he's doing is and you correct me if I'm wrong, Max, because you're here. But I feel like what you're doing is you're doing a lot of bet hedging, and you're basically like, okay, so here's the ones I'm concerned with. If there's some kind of punishment, then I'm going to give those ones special attention. And especially if I can like kind of get off scot-free with something simple. So you're basically just like covering your bases. That speaks to me of maybe I'm doing a little armchair psych here, but that speaks to me of somebody who's got a lot of like anxiety about potentially eternal torment. It's like you're doing a lot of mathematics in your head and mental gymnastics to say, okay, like let me just make sure that in as many cases as I possibly can be, I'm covered. And to some extent, I can understand where that's coming from. But again, as Forrest and I have emphasized many, many times, the way that you're choosing which ones are worthy of your attention is arbitrary and different depending on the person in question. So it doesn't end up being like an actual logical, as you sort of called in, like a mathematical or a logical flowchart, right? You're basically just like, I find this compelling, so I'm going to cover my basis on this. I don't find this compelling, so I'm not going to cover my basis on that. What if I told you that you could be saved from the hell of Gibbonology by, again, just saying that you believe in the great Hylobates who rules from the sky? And in our version of hell, it's really bad. It's dry. There's no fruits. You're not allowed to hoot and holler. Like it's a really bad place. You don't want to go there. And all you have to do is confess, again, that the great Hylobates is real. But to you, you find that silly and non-compelling because it's very clear that, again, we're being tongue-in-cheek on it. But there are so many religions in the world that people find compelling that you don't, and vice versa, right? I don't think if you sat down with, again, somebody of like Raelism or the Aetherium cult or Heaven's Gate or Om Shinrikyo, and you were like, listen to me on this. You need to find my arguments compelling. You're going to say, I don't give a shit what you have to say. My guy levitates, and that's good enough. So it's like you're coming from a completely subjective standpoint, which is where I think at least I'm having trouble sort of following your Pascal's wager here.
I understand your first part, and I want to say it's not arbitrary in the sense that take anyone in the world who thinks logically through this, same as me, they also will come to the same conclusion that if the probabilities are the same, but some of them have a worse outcomes, like infinity in hell, then logically the choices narrow down. And once you are at the same lowered amount of choices, which are also identical, you just pick the one that's more convenient, that's less restrictive on your life. I don't want to really do like helping the poor. I don't want to give 50% of my income to church. So I'm not going to be a Catholic, for example. I don't want to go, have restrictions on eating pork or something. So I'm not going to be a Muslim, right? I want something easy like Protestantism, where on your deathbed you just say, "I believe," and you're good like that. How is that not logical? And how is that not meaning that being atheist is logical?
I think because, Max, what you just stated, why wouldn't you pick a religion that you can just convert on your deathbed and be covered? I think it's because I find that equally as compelling as gibbonology, right? Like, it's not logical because the premise itself isn't a real threat to me. I don't think that if the Protestants are correct, or sorry, if one of the 40,000 denominations of being Protestant is correct, I mean, I guess that's Christianity, so some number less than that is correct, then it's like, I don't think that guy is going to be convinced by my deathbed confession. And I don't think that it, given the character of God or Muhammad or whoever it is that we're talking about in their holy books, which, remember, was a prerequisite for being taken seriously on your account, I don't think that they genuinely find that deathbed confession to be something that you can do and kind of slip under the pearly gates. I'm not like well versed in the Quran. I'm not well versed in the Bible, but I'm certainly well versed enough to know that the creator of the universe isn't going to be like, Jeffrey Dahmer, you almost had me. But at the end of the day, you did say that you were a Christian now. And so I guess you can come up to heaven. Just, you better not be eating anybody up here. We got our eyes on you, Like, I don't buy that. I don't think that's compelling.
No, I also want to throw out there, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I
No, I was done.
Okay, so I also want to throw out there that, like, you're asking why it's not logical to arbitrarily pick the one that's most convenient for you. The reason it's not logical is because your lifestyle that you're trying to appease here is a modern invention. So 2,000 years ago, when these books were written and when these religions were founded, they certainly had different rules and regulations that were comfortable and societally and culturally beneficial for them that you don't now. So you are picking a revised version of this religion that's in your translation and your tradition and suiting your societal and social and cultural comforts in order to survive, because religions evolve that way. You're picking the newest version that is made so that people like you will keep believing in it and keep the tradition alive, as opposed to the actual starting foundational plan of that religion. You are less likely to be saved from hell in this situation. You should be doing it in the most orthodox, old school way possible, and that should be your argument, especially if you're going to sit here and say that all these newer religions are less likely because they're new, and the older ones are real because there's a lot of people that are distant from you that believed this wholeheartedly. That should be more reason for you to be searching back as far back as you possibly can. And furthermore, you're sitting here talking about how, like, you got to prove how atheism is logical. It is more logical and always will be more logical to say, I don't have a good reason to believe this, so I don't. And what you're sitting here is saying, I don't have a good reason to believe this, but I might as well. And that's not logic. That is the definition of illogical.
Okay,
you're doing again,
it's your first part.
It's not going to trick the omniscient, right? Like, again, if you're buying into this, like if you're saying, okay, I want to cover my bases, so maybe there is a guy and he made absolutely everything by ex nihilo or through other means or whatever, you are not going to fool him. Like, it's inconsistent. It's not logical within itself. It's not internally consistent and logical, which I think is also a problem, albeit one that is way down on the list as far as issues that we need to address here.
Okay, for your point, Erika, we don't know what the creator wants, so you might as well just be, he's okay with just saying the words, and that's good. And to Forrest's point, so earlier you said they're all equally likely. Are you now saying that Catholicism, for example, is more likely because it's more ancient? So you kind of have a contradiction in your point.
That's not even close to what I just said.
And Max, it's not. The way that I know that it is inconsistent is that, again, one of the criteria that you gave us was having an ancient book. And in all of the ancient books, I guess I should say in none of the ancient books, and I feel comfortable saying this, none of them paint the omniscient creator of the universe as someone who would be compelled by these, hedge betting confessions, right? Or conversions. They just don't. That none of them are consistent in that way. It would be like saying that, like, even though it's been canceled for many years, Robbie Rotten of the show Lazy Town would actually be like super into exercise. It's like, that's silly. It's inconsistent with the whole catalog of the TV show. I'm saying this because Sporticus is trending on Twitter right now, and I saw it this morning, but it's like, the character wouldn't do that. It's not logically consistent within these holy books to say that you're going to trick the omniscient creator of the cosmos with your hedge betting. It just isn't. And it's like, again, that's way down on the list of problems here. Forrest has already gone over several of them. He went over them right off the bat, but it is something that you have to consider, I think. So it's like, no, I do think it's fair to say that it doesn't work with the characters in which the ones you're trying to trick.
Don't get Erika started on
Well,
Lazy Town, y'all.
you're just putting yourself in gossiping, in evaluating. You're just putting yourself saying, "Oh, I know what God wants. I know that this book is infallible."
He told me in the books. He said so in these books, right? It's like his nature is unchanging, and in order to, believe, or in order to like actually get into heaven, you have to do this, you have to do that, whatever. You have to believe and mean it. And it's like, I'm really sorry, but doing your hedge betting confessional, doing your hedge betting conversion is not going to convince anybody, because I don't think you can actually truly buy into 40,000 denominations at the same time, so you don't go to hell. I don't think you can do that, and I don't think that character would buy it.
Look, I mean, what you said there is just wrong. Look, it's wrong because I'm not saying it's wrong because I'm not saying, for all of them. I'm saying for one particular one, you just hedge your bet on that. It's equally likely. So, you're equally likely to lose, right?
Which one? Give me one religion in which a deathbed confessional that you don't mean, in addition to several other deathbed confessions, is actually going to get you through. What would give me one religion where that's true?
Well, okay. I didn't say I don't mean. I mean, if you're on deathbed, you want it to be true, therefore you believe it, so you have faith, so you mean it. And specifically
but you can't believe several at the same time, which means you're still going to have to pick one. Like, many of these are conflicting, right? Like, you can't do the Islam version and the Christian version and be covered in both.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You can't, and that's not my argument. My argument is that you might as well pick one out of the ones that promise you big penalty for not picking them. So you can pick Islam, but there's certain quirks with that where if you don't follow it as closely, it's really resource intensive to be a proper Muslim.
I have two questions, and I'm going to write one down here for later. How to resolve. And there we go. So, really quickly, do you believe you're calling in saying that you're believing in this just because? It is Christianity though, right? You are believing in Christianity just in case.
Yeah. Generally,
right. Do you believe that the Bible is true?
Yes.
Okay, so then what about the parts of the Bible where God specifically tells you not to do what you're doing? Where God says that if you are lukewarm, I will spew you from my mouth, and I need you to be fervent and deeply entrenched in this religion. And if not everyone who cries out, Lord, Lord, will be saved, I will tell you, depart from me, I never knew you, because you were not 100% bought into the religion. So all the times in the Bible where God tells you not to be a lukewarm Christian and not to believe just in case, and that even some of the people who believe in him and shout out to him and all these things will not be saved because they weren't good enough Christians. If you believe the Bible is true, you should not be doing what you're doing, right?
It's the same argument as not wearing clothes of garments of mixed fabrics. Maybe it's sin now, but on my deathbed,
New Testament.
No, it's not.
This is New Testament stuff. Like,
exactly.
This is like
that's the
recent stuff.
The I never knew you thing, I think, is in Matthew, and the spewing you from the mouth thing is in, I think, Revelations.
I mean, I'm just using it as an example. Don't take it like too literally. I mean that like at my deathbed, for example.
You don't take it too literally.
Yeah, because it's all allegory. But what I'm saying is, on my deathbed,
So
through grace,
the words
I
of
will-
God in the Bible are all allegory? Because those were quotes from God himself.
well, we don't know how it was written, how it was recorded. Maybe the person writing it down had like a stroke.
Oh!
Like it's
But Max, it's really old, and a lot of people believe it. And you are very removed from the people who wrote it. That means it's right?
that means it's possible to be right. That means I should pay attention to it,
So
but it's
how
not
do you
guaranteed to
pick?
be right.
So how do you pick? Because if you pick Forrest's example here, then you are scorning every other of those ones that you need to hedge your bets for, because if they're right, you're going to burn for eternity. But if you pick one of those, then you're screwing yourself on this one. So it's like, how do you, Max, pick which one, and why is it not arbitrary? Why that instead of Gibbonology?
Because whichever is more... Okay, we can agree they're all equally likely, correct? To be true.
No.
No,
They are
Why-
not
why-
all equally likely.
Why
They are
why
not all.
Because some of the beliefs in, again, just in the 40,000 Christian kinds, right? Some of those beliefs involve things like global flood and 6 literal day creation of the earth and plants coming into being before light and all this other shit.
But
So, and we can agree
but
that's
all
not
of that-
true. Whereas some of the other ones say, like you say, it's all just allegory and it actually doesn't matter at all.
it's all written by humans. Humans can make mistakes. To err is human. Maybe they had like a madness.
Yeah,
True. Exactly.
they certainly
true.
can.
But
Yes.
what Forrest is saying is true. Some of them are absolutely more unreasonable than others, right? Like, I do not think that you you could walk in front of every religious person in the United States and tell them that their religion is equally as likely as Heaven's Gate, right? Like, that you're just not going to reach that conclusion. Like, objectively speaking, we can say for a fact that some of these are, insofar as we can know anything, incorrect. As Forrest said, a global flood never happened. 100%. If we can trust anything in science, if the laws of physics are consistent, it didn't happen. Same thing with the 6-day creation, and so on and so forth. Like, there's no support for these golden plates, or that the Jews sailed to North America and founded another, a sect here or whatever. Like, insofar as we can know anything within archaeology, we know that that's not true. But an allegorical interpretation of every scripture ever, of every holy book, I cannot prove you wrong on that, right? It is outside of the purview of science. I can't say anything about it. So is it technically possible that every religious book is right because all of them are actually allegorical? I guess, but so's Russell's teapot, right? Like, we can't assess it.
We can't, but there's a tradition that also goes into it. And to the flood thing, it's allegory for like a really big rain in Mesopotamia, like 3,000 years ago. Like,
sure,
that doesn't
whatever.
mean that there's a possibility that the one that I pick is correct. It doesn't mean that it's impossible that what I pick is right. It means it's possible that what I pick is wrong. That's why I pick based on convenience and assuming that it's equally likely. Of course, not Mormonism, because that's bad shit.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Erika.
Off of convenience. Exactly. You pick on convenience. You pick on what you find compelling. That is what every person under the sun, or at least most people under the sun today, have done to arrive at their current religion, in addition to where they're born, what their family raised them as, right? All of that is accurate. What I'm asking you for isn't to explain that, because we agree that that is how a lot of people arrive at their conclusions. I'm asking you to explain to me why you find what you find compelling to the exclusion of all of these others. Why is Pascal mathematical? Why is it empirical in your eyes? What about it separates, what about your argument here separates you from, the people who did find Heaven's Gate or Om Shinrikyo or realism compelling? Why are you right and they're wrong?
So, okay, let's say for what separates me from Heaven's Gate, right? It's the organization that is communist and that killed its members, convinced them to suicide. So that's obviously wrong. What separates me from Islam?
You mean like the Crusades, when the Pope sent like lots and lots of Christians out to fight and die in a war, killing their members? and also others.
Besides that point, I would just like to state that it was Muslims who invaded the Near East
that,
in their conquest in 600. Khalid ibn Walid, he's the one who invaded Syria.
Okay, so then you know that Islam is wrong because they killed themselves and others. Then
I know. I think it's not worthy of my belief in that because it's too much rules. They don't respect women, and like I respect women, and because they have too many requirements.
I will say I like that. I am glad that you're taking that into consideration because in the current climate, a lot of people don't. So I'm glad to hear that. But what Forrest said is
you may be
true,
a liar,
right?
But at least you're a feminist liar.
Like there's an issue with this in the sense that it's like, again, the people that did Heaven's Gate found that argument compelling. They thought that what was being said to them by Bo and Peep, or I can't remember what their leaders' names were before they did what they did. Say again.
Jim Jones, that was him.
No, that's the People's Temple. I'm talking about Heaven's Gate. The ones who ritualistically told themselves to ascend to Halley's Comet as it passed over their cabin or whatever. I mean, they thought that was compelling. The people that thought the Crusades were compelling thought they were compelling. Every person that has ever died for a religion or a cause did so because they thought it was compelling. Why is yours mathematical?
Look, I cannot be sure for 100%. In maybe like one multiverse out of like 10 trillion, that is the correct one. But in that case, I'm shit out of luck. But if it's not, then we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm right and they're wrong. Maybe I'm right and the Muslims are wrong. Bin Laden died for nothing.
I just want to point out 41 minutes in that this call started because you called in and put on the call screen. You have mathematical proof that shows atheism is illogical. And now, 41 minutes in, your actual argument comes out, and it's, I just kind of want to, I like this one. That's the argument. That's the actual, I kind of like it, and it's comfortable, so I'm going to do it. Fuck it. Fuck it is your argument. Mathematical proof that you have brought to the table is fuck it.
Look, it's math if I draw the little square with 4 tabs, and then it's -10, -10, and then 1,000 -10. Like the probability table, right?
But you can't do game theory on which religion is right, Max, because the premise in and of itself on how compelling one religion is over another is subjective. That's why you can't do game theory on it. Like I get where you're coming from. I do. I empathize with your position because it's like, why wouldn't you want to just, go down the list just in case? Like I empathize with that. I do. But a mathematical proof that atheism is illogical is not this argument, right? That's not what we've heard here.
No, so the reason it's mathematical is because I take every religion and I put it against, I do Pascal's wager versus atheism. And every religion wins out. Obviously, that's the point of Pascal's wager. And so out of the ones that have infinite gain, infinite penalty, out of those, then I apply, what I like, what appeals more to me, right? You see what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, and I get how you feel that that's mathematical because it's pluses and minuses, and it's like, well, atheism is a sunk cost, right? Like, well, that's not the word, but it's like you're not getting anything for sure guaranteed. So it's like, why not hedge your bet on something and then pick on what you hedge your bet on, which one you find most compelling? But it's that second part that is the problem, because I would make the argument, from my personal opinion, that none of the organized religions that we have can stand up to that kind of scrutiny and thus deserve to be on that table in the first place. You see what I'm saying there? Like, it's not hedging my bet any more than it's hedging my bet with Gibbonology. You're not going to put Gibbonology on your chart, even though the punishment is really great, because you don't find the premise to be compelling in the first place.
Okay, I see. But then I have to use like another type of argument to convince you why it's true. And it's not as good.
Would be good.
They're not as strong.
It would be stronger if it was a decent argument. If it was a logical argument, it would be way better than whatever you've been throwing at us for 44 minutes. We have another call I want to get to. So, like,
logical argument.
But Forrest is the host, so he's in charge. I'm merely the minion today. So Forrest, it's you want to let him have a final statement or whatever, go for it.
If you want to continue having fun, I'll let you. I don't think we're getting it. It's been 44 minutes and we're still at the exact same place where we started, which is just, I don't know, I like it because I do. That's and every time you say, well, it's very old. Okay, here's this other very old thing. Yeah, but I don't like that one. Okay, well, here's this other. Yeah, but it doesn't have a punishment. Okay, here's something with a punishment. Yeah, but I don't like that one. It's all just whatever just feels like it to you. And there's no math and there's no logic and there's no actual argument. It's just, I don't know, fuck it. I might as well pick one, and I'm going to pick this one because, and never for a second, considering the fact that all of them could very easily be wrong, and there's a way to tell if something is more likely to be right or wrong. It's science, it's logic, it's critical thinking, and you, rather than engaging in that, are just flatly refusing to do any of it and just deciding to believe a magic thing because you might as well. And that's the whole argument. It's just you might as well.
That's just planned. You guys are not mathematicians. You said you're biologists. I have a BS in electrical engineering, so I know a little bit about probabilities. I took a stats class, so
I have taken many stats classes. Both of us have graduate degrees, Max. We know stats. It's like
okay. Look,
I mean, shit. I took an entomology class, so I guess I can go around saying I'm an entomologist. And I took chemistry, so I'm a chemist, and I took physics.
You're all the things.
I've got all of it. I mean, I even watched a YouTube video about religion the other day, so you could say
you're a religiologist.
Yeah, you could say that. Like, it's not about expertise here, honestly, Max. Like, that's the ultimate funny part about what you just said is that it's like Forrest and I aren't even throwing it doesn't take our credentials to make this argument. You could have random people with random expertises come up here and make this same argument, which is that just because I individually find it compelling is not a mathematical argument, right? Like it just isn't.
Let
I also just can't get past the fact that, like, you have yet to present literally any math in this entire call, despite that being the point that you put on the call screen. You have not made one mathematical statement yet. And you're going to say, you guys aren't mathematicians. I, in my bachelor's degree, did a stats class. So did I. And then another one in my first master's. And, like, I don't know what to tell you, bro. Like, it's...
I told you the little square with the 4.
The little square? You mean a chi-square? What are you talking about?
No. I mean the little square with the 4.
He's a mathematician,
right?
guys.
Square,
the little squares. The little squares. The mathematician knows the little squares.
I remember when you said that, and again, I have to emphasize, after you said that, I said yes, but what goes into deciding which religions make it into the little squares is itself subjective, because it's what you find to be compelling. So it ceases to be mathematical again. So I co-sign what Forrest has said here. I remember the little boxes, I remember the little squares, but that's not mathematical because what you're using to decide to go into the squares isn't mathematical, right? Which, that's hard. I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything else to say on this.
It's mathematical because there's numbers in it. But let me exit with this question. On your deathbed,
there you go. It's mathematical because there's numbers. Jesus, dude. I'll be honest with you, Max. I don't think that I believe you on literally anything at this point. It's hard. This is kind of like what we call what is it? Poe's law, where it's really hard to tell if somebody is being sincerely ridiculous or if they're actually just fucking with you. And like, we've been going for a long time because it's been kind of fun, but it's getting to the point now where it's so absurd, it's difficult to justify actually continuing to talk to you. It's mathematical because it has numbers. No, I'm not going to let you finish, because clearly you have no idea what you are talking about, and you want us to try to make sense of it enough for you to have a discussion. And I'm really tired of putting in the work for fucking two people in this conversation.
In the next slide.
I want you to go learn what statistics are and how they work and how math works, and maybe go back and learn. Go revisit your old thing. Learn. I think you're talking about a probability square, or maybe a truth table. I don't know. Learn what the things are before you try to criticize people for not knowing what they are. That's madness, dude.
Okay.
And if you're going to
Can
say
I
you
just
have a
say one thing
mathematical proof,
before I leave?
come in with math. No, you cannot, sir. You're done. It's over. You wasted an hour of our time by being ridiculous, and it was really funny and worth the content, and now it's not. Have a good day, Max. It's over. It's just, it was funny and it was worth it for the laughs, and now it just fucking isn't anymore. It got too silly too fast.
I just like, I mean, I feel like we took 45 minutes to get to I think, right? Like we took so long to get to this I did just fuck it because it's compelling. Like okay, cool, but that's what everybody says. And don't come in with the mathematical premise if you're not going to come with math. Come on.
It's just stupid. That's the thing, man.
I could have been schooled so easily by actual math. I'm not a mathematician. You could have roasted. I could have gotten so busted. It would have been so easy.
It would have been terrible. But like, no, there was a lot of people in the chat who were like, please fucking end this call like 14 minutes ago. And like, I wanted to keep going because I know this dude's a repeat caller. I don't know what he's called in about before, but like, I really, my goal in that call, after about the first 15 minutes of this obviously isn't going anywhere, I really just wanted Max to just show his entire ass here on the internet and show that he has absolutely nothing to stand on. He does not even know what he is talking about. And he just has some stuff that he wants to say because he didn't think about it. It popped into his head, and that means he's right. And Max did not disappoint in that way. Max disappointed in every other way, but did not disappoint in that way. Insofar as just completely exposing that he does not have an actual fucking thought process here. Oh, also our producer just said he's also a Trumper. Big fucking surprise.
Wonderful. I wish we could have gotten at that as well. Oh, by the way, make sure you're registered to vote, everybody. I did early voting last week, so make sure you go vote. It's important. It's really important.
You can go to vote.org and you can double check. Make sure you know your polling place is. Show up. Turn out. Vote for Harris. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Just do it. I get it, but just do it. Yeah, I don't know. I have so little patience for like I'm gonna be quick. I have so little patience for like that. I believe something for some profound reason, and then it boils down to because. Okay, but then just say that. Like I don't care. I don't care. Like if you believe something because you had some individual crazy experience, go nuts. But you can't use that to say that I'm an idiot for not also buying into it, right? Like
that really if Max had called in and just said, I just believe this because I want to, and it doesn't matter. That would have been the conversation, and we would have gotten to where it took us 45 minutes to get to instead. But instead, dude really, really wanted to pretend like he had a thought, and it just, man, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. We've got a couple more callers on the line here. Lines are still open for theists and theists alone, I will say. Because we have two atheists who've been waiting for a very long time, and I don't even know if we're going to be able to get to them. So, like, let's just say if you're a theist and you want to call in, or fuck it, if you're a Trump supporter, call in too. And we'll talk to you as well. But for right now, we've got David, pronouns he, him, calling in from watery anglerfish. Aren't they all? As wants to talk about classic Chinese philosophy, which I don't know about you, but I'm not versed in. But more interestingly is calling in as a panzoist, which as I understand is the belief that the entire universe is indeed conscious. We've talked about this a few times. David, you were on the line with Forrest and Erika. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's nice to talk to you both. I've admired you for a long time.
Thank you.
I can't wait to disappoint you.
So where do you want to start? You want to start with the pragmatic panzoist thing, or you want to start with the Chinese philosophy deal?
I'm going to be straight up with you. I don't have any training at all in Chinese philosophy. I don't have any good training in Western philosophy. I know a few philosophers I like, but I'm not prepared for any kind of a philosophy conversation. It would be pointless. So like, much rather just stick to panzoism myself. But if you have something specific you want to bring up and we can talk about it without having to have a deep knowledge of individual philosophers and what they said, I'd be into it. Just as long as we don't get into a Jackie call of like, here's a million
No,
philosophers.
no, not doing that. I mean, I do feel like if I'm going to talk about Chinese philosophy not being Chinese and not speaking Chinese, I do have to say that it's from Roger Ames, who is the the head of the humanitarian department at Peking University. Very well respected Chinese philosopher.
Cool.
So that's all.
I
appreciate
the clarification.
I think that it's important. That part of it is important. So I'll talk about that for a minute. So my view is that culture is built on top of past culture. That there's a foundation that starts, and then we kind of build up on that. We don't necessarily erase the bottom. So, for instance, Western culture is built on Christianity and the Platonic forms, this kind of transcendent belief in something that's permanent. And I believe that that has now morphed into us believing in truth as being a transcendent thing. And so we look for laws of nature, we look for laws of logic, we look for all these things that don't change. They stay the same. And that's been a bias through Western culture right up till now. And I think we're at a point in science where that bias is hindering us. And the Chinese view from the way back, the I Ching is one of the oldest books in history, is the book of changes. And that their basic view of the world is everything is always transforming. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in the state of change. And that changes the whole way you look at the world. When you think of the world as having permanence, something that's real, more real than our experience, or which is all changing, when you think of that, you're always looking for truth. When you're recognizing that the world is always transforming, you're looking for balance. You're trying to figure out how to move in the world in a way that will make your life as good as it possibly can be, and recognize that truth is something else. Truth is based on trust. The Chinese word for truth, I can't pronounce it, at its radical is sincerity, but Roger Ames describes it as trust. So I believe in the theory of evolution, biology, because I trust that method. It's not because I think that it's permanently true.
Date. When was this person alive? Heraclitus. 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 I like it because it's got clit in it. It was around 540 BCE. Greek philosopher who said the only constant is change, and that you can't step in the same river twice, and that life is always changing. So, like, don't even need to go to a Chinese philosopher. We can go to a Greek one. And this seems to be like an old idea that the point I'm making is that this is an old idea that isn't unique to Eastern philosophy. I didn't know if you were bringing up Eastern philosophy to say that it is somehow truer, or like has more something to hang on to, or if you're just saying, here's this old ass idea. What do you drive? Because what are you getting to? Like, what's the point?
Okay, the point is that this is the pragmatic point, that whatever we believe in, whatever has to be filtered through our value system. And that makes it that you constantly have to think about, what is my value system and what are the possible outcomes of this beliefs that I have in terms of how they affect the world around us. And you can see this in Chinese culture, and that's why it's much more important than the Western philosophers that have said this and been ignored and paved over by all these people that believe in transcendence. You can see that that made Chinese and much of Eastern culture much more socially oriented, much more concerned about their connections in relationships, their connections to the natural world, whereas the Western world, because of this preference for truth, has ignored so much of those kinds of things. It's led to individuality. It's led to this dismissal of the wild world. So that's my only point is that we have to think about what we're basing our beliefs on, run it through our value system, and then think about what that means in terms of how we act in the world.
I strongly disagree with the concept that because we are focused on truth, we necessarily get to individualism and a strong difference between culture and nature. Those are cultural constructs that are very different than science. And I would argue that is like science actually goes against those concepts, in my opinion. I from my search for truth and from my insistence on the scientific method and from my understanding of the scientific realities of this universe, actually derive a lot of meaning that are antithetical to the individualistic structure of Western society and to the dualistic separation of culture and nature. It sounds to me like you are taking this very like basic philosophy that is not in any way unique to this region and then blaming the rest of the culture of this region on that, and in so doing boiling down this culture and making it into almost a stereotype that you can then kind of like juxtapose against a stereotype of Western culture, and none of that's appropriate. I don't think any of that's reasonable or really justifiable in any way.
Okay, I hear that. Obviously, I have a lot more that I could say about Chinese culture. We have limited time, and I don't think it's appropriate. So, I mean, I have a lot more to say that would substantiate my case. I think
Maybe
that it's
with
very worth. Huh?
I would take
Pardon
it up
me?
with a cultural anthropologist who
I
specializes
think,
in those areas.
yeah, I think that, my issue here is that it's like, I agree with a lot of what you've said, but I don't necessarily agree with the conclusions that you've drawn. So like, is the universe constantly in flux? Yeah. Does science facilitate that? Also, yeah. I think that that's like pretty evident from anybody who kind of dabbles in science of any type, right? I mean, change is what drives it all. So I agree with that, but like outside of that, I don't really know that I can add anything to this conversation. I was trying to rack my brain, like what can I say? What can I actually say and add to this and bring something new to the table? But I don't really think I have anything. I just don't have any level of expertise in what you're talking about. And again, like there's some of it that I'm like, yeah, I could get on board with that. And there's some of that I'm like, I don't really know that you could necessarily say it. And ultimately that makes me a boring addition to this conversation. So
it's just, there's not a lot to engage with there. Let's move on to the
Okay.
panzoism and see if we can get something out of that, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I don't mean to waste your time here.
No, it's really not that. I don't think you're wasting our time. I don't feel like my time is being wasted. I feel like you've called in for something profound from Forrest and I on this topic, but like I can't offer anything. This isn't where I'm coming from. So I don't want to get it twisted,
No, and I don't think it's a waste of time to discuss these things. I just think it's like the main point I'm making is that what you're saying here so far, maybe you have more, but like just based on what you've given me thus far, it's just caricatures. And it's not actually anything like that.
No, I disagree with you there. It's not caricatures. It's the basis of our culture. So if you think about, my original statement was culture is...
You also said a minute ago that Christianity was the basis of like American culture, and that's not true either. And so like, it's just...
I didn't say American culture. I mean, I didn't mean to say that.
Did you say Western
culture, I do believe.
I strongly disagree with that as well. I still disagree with you.
Okay, what is the basis of Western culture?
I don't think that you can pin down. I'm not a cultural anthropologist, so I'm not going to try. But like I can say from my perspective, it doesn't seem like you can really pin down one specific thing. We certainly don't follow every part of a Christian tradition. And like the idea that the thoughts, the moral and structural societal thoughts put forward in Christianity would be a new thing that were unique to Christianity or can be solely attributed to Christianity is ridiculous. not to mention the fact that we do a lot of things that are wrote against Christianity. And also, especially as we're talking about modern Western culture, it is very much a melting pot, especially here in America, especially considering the fact that America was largely based on Iroquois culture, that we stole the idea of like Congress and Parliament and all these things and then integrated it into our culture. And then that became a wave that swept backwards recursively across Europe, especially starting with the French Revolution and then moving from there to where all these other places gained a lot more independence because of America's adaptation and adoption of indigenous cultures here as we committed genocide against them and assimilated a little bit of their ideas. There's a lot to be said there. And to boil it down to say that Christianity is the basis of this culture, I think is grossly oversimplifying and leaving a lot of things out. And then to try to juxtapose that to Eastern culture as if that's a thing, and say that, oh, well, here's this one Chinese philosopher and this one Chinese idea, and therefore that's somehow unique and special and different. Even though that same concept is found across the philosophical landscape, as far as I can tell, and certainly across the cultural landscape in the indigenous cultures all around the world, having very individualistic and community-oriented societies that are not capitalistic and don't hold up, and they're certainly not basing it off of whatever the fuck you brought up here. Just, I think all you've given me is just kind of this here's this thing, and here's a caricature of this culture, and they seem to go hand in hand, and that's different than what we have over here, and that doesn't mean anything. And so, like I said, man, I don't have a lot more to add because this isn't my area.
If it doesn't mean anything to you, then there's no reason for us to have the conversation. What I'm trying to get across... Pardon?
That's what I said a minute ago. Go on.
Okay, well, I'm not making a caricature of these cultures, despite what you have to say. What I'm saying is that certainly you have to admit that 2,000 years of Christianity has had a major effect on how we think in our culture. Thought is built up. Culture is built up. It's not something that just happens to us all of a sudden. It's something that comes from our past. So and I'm just saying, because the basic bias of Western culture is in looking for things that are permanent, that exist outside of the changing world, that those things are still influencing the way we think.
I don't know what you're talking about with that, because that
okay.
maybe I'm out of tune with Western culture, but I don't have anything like that. Sounds like idealism to me, and we're a very much materialistic culture. I don't get it. It maybe if you're talking about like the really cushy, flowery kind of like America with like this idealistic version of like eternal patriotism and justice and liberty and blah, 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 certainly doesn't resonate with somebody like me who's philosophically opposed to those concepts. Certainly doesn't resonate with somebody like me or Erika who don't dabble in that type of thing. Overall,
okay. Well, what I was saying, what I said to you,
it sounds grossly oversimplified at best.
I hear that. This is a short conversation we're having.
Sure.
What I said to you is that we've looked in the Western culture for things that are permanent, and we've come to things that are laws of nature, laws of physics, laws of logic, these kinds of things that we say, these things don't change, everything else changes. So that's because of this bias that we have had built into our culture. If it doesn't mean anything to you, that's fine. I'm sorry to use your time.
Does it mean to say that we have a bias, therefore we look to these things? Would you imply then that people who don't have that bias, people from these Eastern cultures you're describing, would not care for those things? Or would not benefit from them?
I think we all have bias. In fact, I think thought is based on bias. But
that's not what I asked you.
Okay, excuse me. I think that because of the bias of the basis of Chinese philosophy, that everything is always in the state of transformation. This has changed the way they see the world. And there has
That's not
been
just Chinese
a
philosophy.
very...
And also, I guarantee you,
Right,
Chinese people
except for
are
we
cool
don't
with
pay any
concepts of
attention
like
to...
laws of physics.
Right, they are now. We don't pay any attention to Lucretius. We don't pay any attention to Epicurus. We don't pay any attention to those people. They did not have a significant influence on Western culture. Plato had a huge influence on Western culture.
You're calling into two people who, I don't think that you're into philosophy either. You're calling into two people. We started this conversation saying we're not big on philosophy, and you're going to throw out Lucretius and Epicurus, who are like, those are names I even recognize because they're so incredibly influential and important, especially for science. And you're going to say that, like, yeah, they just didn't make a big impact. There's not that big of people. You might want to move on to the next thing because this is going downhill quickly. If you want to have something to say about panzoism and we can discuss that, it might be a good idea to move on.
Do you think we could maybe like dig in a little bit to this idea? And if I'm mischaracterizing you here, like let me know that there's like some kind of conscious nature or awareness to like the universe and all living things. Am I wrong? Am I off base on like that's a tenet or at least like a general idea that tends to be associated with panzoism?
Panzoism is not for me. What I believe is that everything is part of life. I don't believe consciousness is that. I'm not an idealist. I don't believe that.
Okay, well, I'm useless here too.
There's probably nothing to dig in there. So
everything is part of life. Are you talking about a universal scale, or are you meaning to say that, like, astrologically speaking, there's like every part of physics is also involved in life? Because I can vibe with that. But are you talking like literally shit going on in the horseshoe or in the Horsehead Nebula and in the Sombrero Galaxy are necessary and functionally a part of life here on Earth? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yeah, I am saying that everything is connected to everything else and that all works together in a way that has made what we call life. Okay. Well, I mean, so my argument there is, and I've heard you say, Forrest, that we can't define life. We have some criteria, but so at what point does the oxygen that we get our energy from, when does that become alive? Is it dead and then we breathe it in and then it's part of our life? Or is
oxygen becomes part of life when it's involved? Oxygen becomes part of life when it is integrated into organic molecules which are functioning within a living being. Your DNA contains oxygen. That oxygen is a part of a living thing. The oxygen itself is not alive, but that you don't even have to go on oxygen for that. That's the fundamental of cell theory. Cells are the smallest things we can call alive. Individual organelles, even things like mitochondria, which reproduce by themselves, are not alive. So cells are alive. The molecules, the macromolecules and molecules and atoms and quarks and leptons that make those things are not alive. And those parts are interchanged all the time.
Right. And this is reductionism. And I believe that reductionism is losing some of its value in terms of how we do science. That this notion that everything can be broken into its little parts and have its, that's David, not true as an evolutionary biologist, right? When does a species become a species? Never.
Oftentimes things can be broken into their little parts, right? Biology is notorious for being a gradient. It's notorious for being messy in that it's difficult to create neat little boxes that things fall into. But at the same time, while it's difficult to tell when red becomes yellow, you can certainly say that some colors are red and some colors are yellow. In the same way that we can say that while it's difficult to point out when life emerges or when a species becomes a new species, right, or descent modification, when a population, you get peripatric or whatever types of speciation, you can certainly say that a rock is not alive, whereas an organism is. You see what I mean? Like it's quite easy to tell the difference there.
unless you want to get back into philosophy and talk about dualisms between life and non-life and talk about the cultural anthropology and different ontologies from indigenous cultures that didn't distinguish things that way. And maybe they're right. And
No,
I say
Forrest,
that as a
please.
joke, but I can't tell if that's actually where you're going.
Or please don't take us back there. It's so dark and scary in that part of the conversation. I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Let me have.
Well, you have other callers. Why don't you just move on? Thanks for talking with me.
You didn't say anything yet. Like, you said that
I did
when does
say
oxygen
things.
become alive?
I did say things, and I resent you saying that.
Yeah, no, we moved on to talking about the universe being a part of life. I'm talking about this part of the conversation. We moved on to this where we said everything in the universe is alive, and you said, when does oxygen become alive? We both gave you a thorough answer, and you're like, oh, I'll just move on. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm happy to keep the conversation going. It's just that you guys don't seem to want to. What I'm talking about is...
David, if I may, because I resent that
Sure.
a little bit, because it is never my intent to make someone feel like I'm not interested in what they have to say. I will be honest when I have nothing to add, and when something is outside of my realm of expertise, which I was earlier, and then we took it into this area of like, okay, when does something become alive? That's an interesting conversation. When does something become a new species?
Okay.
But why is biology so messy? I find that fascinating. I can add something to that, but I was sort of in jest saying that if we take it back to the place it was previously, I cease to have something to add. So that's all we were doing there. And then I feel like you kind of took that as it was meant to be like, oh, like I don't value what your input is or what you have to say. What makes you take the stance that everything is a part of life when we can in fact say when something is alive versus when it is not?
Okay, what makes me think that is because I think that, say, a rock, an example of a rock. So we can't live without rocks. We have to have minerals as part of our system. So we're so interdependent. Things are so intertwined that it's, for me, it's impossible to say where those lines are. And I think that in some ways, always trying to pay attention to what those lines are, where those separations are, has had a tendency to hold back where we need to go in investigating the world we live in, because we're so attached to this reductionist view that it makes us not see the movement between. So we think of the world as a whole bunch of objects, right? But actually, it's also a whole bunch of movement.
You're just defining
but
ecology.
Yeah, but and if I may, right? Like there are aspects of rocks that we require, but there are also aspects of the geologic world of certain ecologies of various ecosystems that are not required for every ecosystem, right? Case in point, we've seen large-scale ecosystem turnover since the dawn of life on this planet. Some organisms or niches have persisted, some come and go. So I would make the argument that, again, while I agree that the boundary between what is alive and what is not can be difficult within biology, with viruses or organelles or whatever, as we sort of alluded to earlier, like some things have some of the characteristics of life and not all. So where do they fall? You can certainly point at something that has none of the characteristics of life and say that thing is not alive, or you can point at elements or whatever that are extremely rare in the universe and have no role in ecosystems on planet Earth and say that is not a part of life, right? So I find it difficult to get on board with the premise that you just stated. It's like, well, everything in the universe has to do with life in some way. You see what I mean? Because some stuff just is, and it doesn't impact us in any way. Some stuff is drastically, vitally important to everything that we do and are, and has always been, and some stuff isn't. And while I can appreciate, certainly I can appreciate seeing the beauty in the interconnected nature of all of the things biotic and abiotic on the planet, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that we can derive a spirituality or a spiritual importance from that. You can, but I don't know that you have to.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly where I'm at. Like, all you're describing here, David, is ecology. The idea that like all the living and non-living parts of an ecosystem all work together in tandem and they're all rely on each other, and you can expand that to the entire biosphere, to the whole earth, and even you can expand it to the solar system. You can, the sun is very much involved in our system. So like you can take this on a somewhat cosmic scale, and that makes total sense. But then to say in some distant galaxy billions of light years from here, there's that shit's important for life on Earth, that doesn't make any sense. There's these boundaries and definitions that we're setting are useful. They're not necessarily constraining, but they're necessary for us to know what we're talking about. Otherwise, we would have to account for the entire universe to understand any bit of life when that isn't necessary at all.
I agree with you that the boundaries are useful. I'm not trying to make that case. That I love science, and I think that there's much value there. I'm just trying to say that we need to think more about the movement between objects, the movement of objects, and less about objects, because we're running against a wall now that can be facilitated. We can work our way through it if we start trying to open up our way of looking at the world.
So can I ask a question, David?
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
To sort of ask a question to that point, right? Like you're coming at this from this perspective that it's like Chinese philosophy, has this kind of figured out, and they all look at it in this different way. And setting aside generalizations or whatever, let's take that at face value. Do you think that China, right, like where it's at scientifically speaking, with their scientific progress, with their scientific community, like do you think that they're categorically figuring out things that we aren't here in the West, or that the global South isn't, or like different locations aren't figuring out? Like, do you think that philosophy has tangibly impacted their output scientifically speaking?
I really wouldn't want to. I just wouldn't venture any argument there. I don't know enough about the current state of Chinese science. I do think that Chinese culture for many years has benefited by having this way of thinking, and that's why they shoot each other a whole lot less. That's why they are much less predatory in the world.
I thought maybe them shooting each other a lot less had something to do with their gun laws, but here I am.
I mean, I would hazard to say the same thing.
No, it's a long history. There's a long history there of people not being violent towards each other.
Let's set that aside for a minute, because I have thoughts on that.
Okay.
I'm sure Forrest does too.
That's not reasonable. I have thoughts on
that. But what I would also say is that it's like there is, and I've got like science brain rot, right? Like whenever I get into the philosophy conversations, my mind is immediately like, oh, okay, well, how can we test that? How can we investigate that? Within the realm of like the stuff that I actually have a decent grasp on. I think that's human. I think we like to pull things into comprehensible places. But sure, I think that your case could very easily be made or defeated by looking at the status of the scientific community in China and seeing, like, are they making these strides that other regions aren't? Because if they have this ideology that is so ingrained and threaded into their culture, to the extent that it's like they're, as you sort of alluded to moments ago, they're like literally killing each other less, which again, I don't agree with that, but that's beside the point. Shouldn't we see that like across the board with their scientific advancements? Like, shouldn't they be making all of these discoveries because they're taking movement into account and the nature interconnectedness of everything into account? I would argue, at least in the fields that I'm familiar with, and maybe Forrest has got a different opinion on this, I'm not seeing a categorical difference in which regions are collectivist or individualistic or have this sort of Eastern philosophy or don't, in what they're putting out scientifically. I don't see it. Maybe it's because, again, I've got the science brain rot and I'm not seeing the philosophy involved, but like, I don't see it. And so that makes me doubt this idea that it's like, oh, if we had this massive paradigm shift in our philosophy in the West, that would make all of this, that would push us forward, in some way.
Yeah, I agree. Like No, I guess, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, it is true to say that people from different cultural backgrounds with different heuristics or different ontologies are going to come to different scientific discoveries sometimes, but they're still using science to do it. They just have a different worldview and a different viewpoint that gets them to the science in the first place. And sometimes they see new things, but they're using the same scientific method and they're coming to the same kinds of scientific truth because that is what objective reality is all about. So, like, to say that they're going to have some secret key to science doesn't make any sense. And certainly to say that they are less, like, a different history of violence and aren't going to be as violent and everything as Western culture, that's nonsense. Like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Okay, well, I would look into that if I were you.
I'll start with the genocide against the Uyghurs and move my way from there.
Okay, and I know you know a lot about Western imperialism and the effects that has had, but
I think the point, though, David, is that it's like this is pot calling the kettle black, right? Like, it's unfortunately, as humans, we are these incredibly compassionate, incredibly monstrous animals where, like, we're simultaneously capable of great kindness and genocide. And, like, that's why you can find genocide everywhere, right? Like, there's no human culture that is immune to being xenophobic, right? Like, that's just the nature of us as a creature. And I would argue that it's like, some philosophies might tamp that down or amp it up, but that's, again, not the question that I'm asking. The question, and maybe, Forrest is asking something different, I don't know, but, like, where I'm coming from here is that it's like, okay, if Eastern philosophy is to move science forward, why aren't we seeing that pan out? If this has been where they stand for so long and that this is so imperative to scientific understanding, why isn't that showing in their scientific output? I'm not saying it's making them worse. I'm just saying that we're kind of all in the same place because, as Forrest alluded to, the purpose of science is to be objective and to sort of kind of transcend cultural norms because you're using the scientific method, which is universal and has been independently discovered by every human group on the face of the earth since the dawn of our species, since the dawn of our genus, since, the dawn of our order, really, to some extent. So it's like, I don't know that implementing Eastern philosophy here is going to make that great of a difference at a sort of national scale, just because it doesn't seem to be doing that where it's naturally found.
I think that's a very worthwhile question, and it would be interesting to investigate it. I have not, so I don't know. There is obviously a very deep sort of cooperative nature to the way the Chinese do science, which is true of us too. That's science is a cooperative endeavor for sure, has to be. But that's a question I can't address. Don't know, but someone could. It is something that would be testable to see what the differences are in the.
Japan also has a very cooperative culture with a rich history of, like, reliant on your neighbor and having, like, this individualistic society and similar. I don't know any philosophers in particular, but, like, I'm 99% sure they have pretty similar philosophies in these ways. Would you agree with that?
They took a different kind of turn with Confucianism, but and that's a whole different question, and you guys don't want to talk about that, and that's fine. But yeah, Japan took that turn, and I would suggest that, especially if you're Japanese, you're much safer on the streets. You're much less likely to be a victim of crime in Japan than you would be here.
And Japan also has a long history of racism and imperialism, and there was, like,
absolutely, totally agree there. Yep.
Yeah, so, like, to sit here and say that, like, they didn't kill hundreds of thousands of people in Nanjing, but because they have this beautiful culture of non-individualism and all this stuff, like, you are continuing after this whole time to conflate, like, one philosophical principle that's kind of traditional in a culture with the actual whole breadth of the culture. That's what I was talking about earlier about
you're straw manning me. You're straw manning me there, Forrest. I'm sorry.
I'm not at all.
Okay, well, that's your belief. That's fine. I did not
you are
say
saying
anything
here is
about the
that
Japanese not having a violent history. Obviously, I've paid some attention to the history
I
of the
didn't say you
world and
did.
have some idea about that.
I didn't say you did. What I'm saying is that you are
I
taking
heard you say that.
one small part of this one philosophical tradition from this one region and saying that it's indicative of like their entire cultural background and the way they do science and the way they view the world and the progress that can be made in this region and all these other things, and not taking into account the fact that their cultural traditions are as diverse and rich as ours are. So for you to sit here a minute ago at the beginning of the call, you were saying that like, well, Lucretius and Epictetus and whoever else, these people aren't as big of a deal. You're identifying and recognizing the fact that we have very broad cultural ideas here in the West, that well, all these different philosophers, they're all disagreeing with each other and they have different parts of different societies and all this big broad. And then in this Eastern culture, you're like, no, they're all, this is this one thing one philosopher said, and they're all like that. And then that's why they're going to do these things differently. That's what I'm talking about with caricatures and stuff. It's you are grossly oversimplifying two chunks of the world as if they are monoliths based on some singular cultural or philosophical idea, and then saying that that is now this pathway to like scientific or objective reality. And I don't get where you're drawing that line, and I don't get how you're not painting, how you are comfortable painting them with this massively broad brush and ignoring the fact that they have been just as violent and fucked up as anybody else in the world because they are people in that culture. And you're going to say that they're less violent and they don't hurt each other and that's actually all safe, and not attribute that to like their laws or their culture or a religious difference or anything else. It's all just worldview from this one philosophy thing, and ignoring the current genocide that they are committing. Like that's, yeah, I don't get how you're comfortable doing any of this. It is the same thing for this whole call. It is just a gross oversimplification of major big philosophical ideas, a caricature of a culture, and then saying that we need to learn from this thing, which doesn't exist. It's this ethereal thing you've made up.
I did not make that up. And you're mischaracterizing me. I'm saying that culture does have strains that become dominant in those strains.
No
and
one's
maybe
arguing
you don't
with
believe
that.
And that's fine.
No
So
one's
I'm
arguing
just
with
talking
that.
about the dominant strains. I'm not saying that we or the Chinese are somehow, that's all we have in our culture is that one strain. I'm just saying that has a basis for the way we think about the world. And then it is different, and you are safer in China, and it's not just because of their laws. It's always been that way.
You're very much safer in China unless you're a Uyghur and unless you speak out against the government. And unless
right.
you do
and
something,
I am not arguing.
Then that's bad.
Okay. I'm not trying to argue that the Chinese are some kind of magically better people. I'm just trying to say that we do have a different basis of how we understand the world from thousands of years back, and that we build on top of that basis. This is the part of the thing that I'm not sure you heard me in, is that I've said that culture has a base for it, and then you build up on top of that.
Argued with it.
So I'm just trying, it's not a caricature, I'm just trying to explain what that base is. Doesn't that make any sense?
I understand what you're saying. It's not accurate. And it's a very, very oversimplified view of this culture and their history. And that's an issue. And it's not, what you're saying is not accurate. And it's just not reasonable or justifiable. No one's arguing that cultures have bases. No one's arguing that cultures evolve and grow. No one's arguing that cultures build on each other. But the fact that we live in a global society is like super fucking influential here. And like every other conclusion you've drawn from this thing has been either like really, really reductive or a caricature, and it's not cool. It's been 40 minutes, dude. I think we need to move on to another one. We got 2 calls left, and we got 20 minutes left before we end the show.
Okay. Well, thanks for talking with me. I'll still admire you both. I'll talk to you later, maybe. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Maybe talk to a cultural anthropologist or a historian about this, because, like, no.
Yeah.
Just no.
I feel like that was just, ultimately there was a strand of that, which was basically just like, he's saying we have an individualistic culture and they have a collectivistic culture. Like, yes, I agree. But like, I don't, what I really wanted to dig into is like, okay, where does that intersect with science? Like what we do and why we do it. And I just feel like that's something that we can actually look at, and we don't seem to see that. And in fact, I have this anecdote where it's like, I work with Miocene apes, and it's like there's this well-known sort of situation with the Miocene where it's like, the guys that work on the Gigantopithecus maxilla and the guys that work on the Gigantopithecus mandible don't like each other very much, and they won't collaborate with each other. And like, that's hindering our understanding of that critter. So it's like, then they're both Chinese paleoanthropologists or paleoprimatologists. So it's like, I don't know, like that's an interesting conversation to me, but it's like you said with the other stuff for me, and I kind of felt like David was painting it almost like, oh, like we're brushing him off, but it's like, no, I just don't know this subject very well. And it's one thing if we're arguing about something, but I genuinely don't even have anything to add. Like I don't have a strong opinion. So
yeah, it's weird. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave just for funsies. Here's a link in the chat from Wikipedia, a list of massacres in China going back through Imperial China into the Republic of China into the People's Republic of China. There's a lot there, and like and you know what it looks like when you look at it? It looks exactly like the kind of massacres from Western cultures for the exact same reason.
And the global South, and indigenous people in America, and like every human group that has ever lived, because it's a shocker, but we are far more alike than we are not alike. Humans are awesome in a lot of ways, and we're shitty in a lot of ways, and that echoes through time and space. And I agree, like certain philosophies can like tamp down on that sometimes. I don't know that we can necessarily point to one and say this is the one that does the best job across the board. And that goes for Eastern philosophy as much as it goes for any. So at least as far as I
know. I agree. And we've got 2 calls left, and we've got 20 minutes left, or I guess 18 minutes left in the show. So rapid fire, 9 minutes apiece. We're going to get through these last 2 people who've been waiting for like 2 goddamn hours. We're going to start with Arya, pronouns he, him, calling in from Nice Yams. Nice yams, y'all. Wants to know what's the difference between... Yeah, it's solid. We wants to know the difference between creationism and intelligent design. There isn't one. Arya, you're on the line with Forrest and Erika. What's going on?
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Really
good. We're doing.
Really good.
You're doing, yeah. I've been watching your videos for a while, and just quick background. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I've been reading up on evolution for going back to my college days, like 15 years ago.
Awesome.
So I knew about intelligent design and creationism in a broad sense, but I didn't really look into what they were claiming exactly. So it's only now that I'm kind of paying more attention to what they're saying. And like sometimes, like Erika, in one of your videos, you mentioned the Neanderthal and the Homo sapien skulls that you were comparing. You were showing the differences between them and how it disproved creationism, and that was a great, short segment that I liked. And then Forrest, your video about Stephen Meyer and DNA, and you were talking about how he was intelligent. He was speaking about intelligent design, and then I had a question. I'm like, what is the difference between these two? Like, I'm hearing they sound alike, but
If you talk to an intelligent design advocate, they will tell you that there's a major difference, and that intelligent design is not based on religion, it's based on logic. And that when you see that there's information and complexity at the most fundamental points of life, that allows you to infer through inductive reasoning that there must have been some sort of creator that made this life. And then they just kind of hide the fact where they're like, and that creator is God, and it also happens to be the God of the Bible, and it's also the Bible that I like, and the translation and the version that I like, and then also you shouldn't have butt sex. And like that's what it actually is. And so like they try really hard to make it this scientific sounding thing, when really at the end of the day is magic. It is, they believe in magic, and they believe there's a guy out there who can do magic. There's no difference.
I want to add something to this, right? Like there's a rich and very interesting history when it comes to creationism and intelligent design. And the naked truth is that the latter was born of the former unequivocally, right? Like we saw this happen in the late 90s, early 2000s. Intelligent design was a deliberate strategy to try to reinsert creationism into the schools. Now, intelligent design conceptually, this idea that things are really complicated, therefore a creator is obviously a lot older. I mean, that goes back to Paley. That's a Paley's watchmaker analogy. But the problem is, you could defeat this idea of teleological argument from design with the simple fact that it's like we see things that look designed, which are demonstrably not designed, right? Irreducible complexity doesn't work because we see complexity emerge out of simplicity all the time. Right? The example that I love to bring up is ecosystems. Ecosystems are so complicated and interdependent. And if you remove any piece of an ecosystem, the whole thing is at risk of falling to pieces. And yet we see these things emerge out of nothing, ex nihilo, each piece growing more interdependent on another. And then it's like, okay, well, what about the bacterial flagellum? And it's like every part that seems so complex that it's just incomprehensible can always be broken down into more comprehensible pieces. And this was famously demonstrated with the blood clotting cascade in Kitzmiller versus Dover, the trial that put intelligent design to the test and convinced a Bush-appointed judge that it was repackaged creationism. So, at the end of the day, intelligent design is just creationism, but it's more incredulous, it's more vague, it's more nebulous, and it tends to be it tends to hide itself. It tends to try to disguise itself, as Forrest said, behind these laws of logic and things of that nature. But invariably, where you find an intelligent design advocate, you find a religious person. Invariably. There is no one that starts, at least that I've encountered, that starts with, a more neutral position of like, I don't have a religious belief, but I'm open to it, right? Who then sees the complexity of the cell and then says, wow, intelligent design is compelling to me. I must investigate the many religions and then come to the conclusion of which one I find compelling. It's always like there's some biology student with no background in evolutionary biology or anything of that nature. They have a separate religious experience and then come to view everything within science through that lens. That's how they reach that point, at least in my experience and from what I've seen of these people. It's not like they're not intelligent folks. It's just that there's a lot, in my opinion, of cognitive dissonance going on there. And so at the end of the day, right, like I'll say for the third time, right, it's like it's repackaged criticism. And also when you encounter these people in the wild, all you have to do to kind of shut this down is say, okay, what's the model? Right? What are you testing? What hypothesis are we testing here? How do you test irreducible complexity? Right? How do you test this argument from incredulity? Who's the designer? How did they design? Where is the line behind what evolution can and does do, and where God or whoever this mysterious seed design proponentist intervenes? Like, where do they intervene? Why do they intervene there? Is it the Cambrian explosion? Cool. Why? Right? Like, is it bipedalism? Okay, great. Why? Like, and the whole thing falls apart. It's arbitrary.
Yeah, that's something that I talked about. I just was at SciCon and I gave a talk about how to teach evolution to creationists, and that was the main focus at the end of it. Is that like creationism, intelligent design, all these things, they try to trap you into a dichotomy where it's like either evolution is 110% true or creationism, biblical creationism specifically, is 110% true. And those are the only two options. And so logically, if I can get you to admit that you don't know every single fucking thing about how everything evolved, then logically you must admit that every word of the Bible is true. Either you can see a dog give birth to a non-dog, or donkeys and snakes can talk. Those are your options. And they have never and will never and could never actually provide any evidence for their claims. All they have is, I don't know, therefore magic.
It's worse than that, Forrest, because it's like we don't know where the knife that killed 5 people in the forest was manufactured, so forensic anthropology is fake. That's
precisely.
like, that's crazy. In one case, you can't figure out one piece, so the whole ology is bullshit. And it's like, I'm really sorry, but that's silly.
Yeah. Now, does that answer your question, Arya?
Yes, it does. I just had a hard time visualizing what creationists or intelligent design advocates think happens. Like, I'm just trying to, because I've had evolution basically, like, it's been so ingrained in me that I just can't, like, visualize what they think happened. Like, do they think, like, a deity dropped something out of the sky and then it just formed fully as a person? I'm just trying to visualize and I can't visualize what they think.
Your confusion on that is no fault of your own. And the reason you're confused is because there is no unified front for intelligent design, because it's not a model and it has no hypotheses. That's the problem that you're like, talking about here, is part of how we know that it's not science, because there's no set of criteria at all. Like, we don't know what they believe, because the whole belief system is, I don't know, looks pretty complex to me. I mean, isn't that crazy? It's like,
like for the longest time, I always pictured it as mythology. Like, oh, a god from the sky, whoever god it could be, dropped something out of the sky and it landed on the ground and it formed fully right there. Boom, done. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like something I'd read in Greek mythology. Cool, I guess. But I don't see how it maps onto reality at all.
Yep, that is all it is. You hit the nail on the head. It is just mythology, and it's just mythology with a fresh paint of science coat, a fresh coat of science paint that tries to make it look like it's anything other than just more religion. Anyway, with that, Arya, we got one call left, and we got 9 minutes in the show. So I appreciate you, but please call again next time if you have any other questions.
Arya. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And we got one left. We got Jason, pronouns he, him, calling in from Aardvark Rectums, once and says that he believes that there are higher evolved beings out there. I don't know what that means. We're going to talk to Jason. You are on the line with Forrest and Erika. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to first at least establish a baseline. Okay. Do we all agree that the universe is billions of years old?
Yes, 13.8.
Okay. All right. Do we all agree that evolution is scientifically proven?
Insofar as anything can be, yes.
Exactly what I was about to say. As much as the word proof means anything, yeah.
Okay. And one last thing. Can we agree that matter and energy is not destroyed, just transformed?
Yeah, first law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, I can't think of an exception, so yep.
Okay, now what I will say, and I'm going to leave these two for the end, the Bible does get 2 things right, as far as I know, only 2. One is actually a geological thing, and the other is, like, I guess, more of a philosophy or a way of life. But what I'm looking at is, or the way I see it, is, yes, I'm an atheist, but I feel that it's arrogant to believe that we are the only or the highest level of evolution in the universe. And given the billions of years that the universe has been around, it's not inconceivable to think that beings, evolved way beyond us
And this is where the theory comes in. They became beings of energy. It's the ultimate evolution from matter to energy because it transforms. And
So it's speculative
So-
evolution then. And also,
Yeah.
I don't know what that
Jason-
means.
Yeah, Jason, you had me until ultimate evolution, right? Because the nature of
Mhm.
evolution
well,
is
I mean,
there's no-
I say ultimate, but it's ultimate as in like that's the highest that I could think of, given the information we have.
But evolution
Sure,
is not
and,
a
like-
ladder.
right.
Huh?
And to Forrest's point, right? Like this sounds like cool spec evo. Like I love speculative evolution. I think that's great. And like if you could create some kind of, plausible chain from organic critters up into some kind of energy based life form, I don't know how that would work, but if you could do that and it's clearly increasing the fitness of these guys and they're doing great and it's allowing them to spread around and, continue to exist, sure. But
Yeah,
to me, that's the point that
like I said, I know that we're not anywhere near something like that. I'm just thinking as as we evolve more, and
Yeah.
considering the age of the universe, it's not inconceivable to think that other beings had evolved to that or beyond or whatever. The point what I'm getting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Is
no,
it?
I mean, what I was gonna say is that, like, I feel like I already agree with you on what your main premise was, which is that it's like, yeah, there is absolutely no reason to think that humans, where we are now, given the vastness of and size of the universe and how common water and rocky planets are, there's no reason to think that we are the only ones. I think that that is arrogant, to be honest. But I don't know very many people who say we are the only ones. I know many people who say we don't know if we are or aren't. It seems likely that there are others out there, but like we don't know what they are, where they are, if we could ever reach one another, if they're still around. There's so many ifs, ands, buts, etc.
And I didn't want to put a definitive, okay, well, because we don't know, it doesn't exist kind of cap on it, because everything is still evolving. The whole premise of this, and this is where my belief comes in, is that for me, it's inconceivable that there are no beings that have evolved beyond our, understanding, put it that way. And through science, and
like
I thought about how
it's kind of like
they might.
You're making an
Go
argument
ahead.
from I said it kind of feels like you're making an argument for like big size, big space, long time to say, evolutionarily speaking, if you get life, inevitably you're going to get something that is incomprehensibly more complex and intelligent than we are. And to that, my answer is maybe. I don't know.
Kinda.
Yeah, that's the thing is like you.
And
what I think you're missing is that like when we talk about evolution, when you gain fitness in one environment, you necessarily lose fitness in another environment.
Right.
And so like what you're talking about here is in terms of evolution, you're picking like intelligence and ability and all these things that you are deeming are like these higher evolved traits because you're comparing them to humans, and you're neglecting the fact that we fucking suck at swimming. We're bad at breathing underwater. We're also really bad at constricting,
remember,
and we're also really bad at digging.
Theory, not as a fact.
Right, but what I'm trying to get home to make clear to you is that like when we talk about more evolved, all that means is that your lineage is longer. There is no actual quantifiable way to say more or less evolved. It just means how long your lineage has been alive. For us, it's 3.8 billion years.
And so I guess you could say I was using the terminology that I had available.
If you
that's
right, and I get what you're saying. But what I'm trying to clarify is that if you pick some species of super whatever life out there that's been alive for 10 billion years, right? This lineage is way longer. They're way more evolved than us. There's no reason to then expect, well, they're also going to be super intelligent, or they're going to all have great hair, or they're going to be energy or whatever like that. They could be 10 billion years worth of the best goddamn fossorial mole things that are just really good at eating worms. They're the best at eating worms, and that's all they do. And so like for you to say that you believe there are higher evolved beings out there, that even if we concede that evolution is this thing that's going to happen, and I would agree with you that there's almost certainly other life out there somewhere, there's no reason to believe that they're any different than things here on Earth, better, worse, more advanced, less advanced
there's no
technology,
way of
any of
really
that,
knowing.
no assumption you can make.
Yeah, there's no way really knowing with what the information we now currently have. My purpose for pointing that out, or
what do you base your belief
laying
in?
that out. Oh, that's what I said. That's why I was like laying those things out.
Sure.
And I was thinking that the universe, our universe, whatever, might as well be a giant petri dish. No, we can't, contact higher beings. It'd be like bacterium in petri dishes that we do experiments on, trying to contact the scientists or whatever.
Okay, well, now you're talking about something entirely different. Now you're talking about theology.
Well, that's where I was. Yeah, but that's where I was kind of going with it. The fact that I've never.
Damn it, man!
At least for me, I've never.
You took 8 minutes to get there, and now we're talking about theology, and we got to end the show. There's no reason to believe in that either. Is the thing?
Jason,
no, I wasn't saying that there isn't a reason to believe in it, but it's that whole and I will if it's like the topic comes back up again if I get the chance. But yeah,
next
that's just
time,
like no reason to believe in a God, and I get that, but I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not throwing out that.
Yeah. I want to talk about this. This would be really fun. I'm sad that you can be here for longer, Jason, because it's like the extra dimensional king alien versus God. Like where does the spec evo end and the theology begin? Like I think that's really fun.
Right. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Well,
Jason, definitely call back next time Erika's on.
But yeah.
That's
I'll
see
I want to talk about this.
Yeah, call Erika. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. That's the show, but before we wrap up, how are you, Erika? How'd that go for you?
Oh, dude, I'm good. I'm bummed now. Like I'm like over my hangover. This cured me of my hangover. I'm feeling good. I would love to take that to termination, but unfortunately, Forrest and I, being incredible at our jobs and known for our brevity, we simply must sign off, leave you guys with a wonderful video. Forrest is going to tell you what's coming next, and make sure you're back here for After Dark. It's going to be good.
I wish we would have cut like 10 minutes off of the China call and put it onto that last one. That would have been fun.
Right? Why?
Yeah. Now it's the thing. I'm going to read what they said. Here's a video from Humanist for Harris, and you can check that out. It's happening right now.
All right. Good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This Humanists for Harris call is brought to you by Secular Democrats of America, a network of Democrats advocating for secular governance, promoting respect and inclusion of non-religious voters in the Democratic Party, and mobilizing non-religious voters to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. I want to thank Sarah Levin of the Secular Democrats of America for organizing tonight's event, all of our speakers for making time this evening, all of you for joining in. My name is Hemant Mehta. I write at friendlyatheist.com. I've been covering politics and religion for many years, and I'm so excited that we are able to do this tonight. Through the course of the evening, you are going to see links because more than anything, we want to make sure all of you are able to donate if you can to the Harris Walls campaign, and even more importantly, perhaps, volunteer. And you will see the links in the chat where you can volunteer in your community, how you can help out, what you can do. And with that, we are going to get started. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping and let you know that as people speak, we fully encourage you to use the reaction emojis at the very bottom of your screens. Let us know how you're feeling, because I know there's not as much interaction just because we are limited in that. Closed captioning is also available. You can turn that on by clicking the CC button in your meeting controls. And remember that this webinar is being recorded. We will post it. We will post clips later. And when we do that, please, please, please share them with everyone you know. Just flood your own Facebook feed with them so there is something good in that feed for everyone you know. And more than anything, just make sure you are signing up to volunteer and donate. All right. And with that, let's get started. Our first speaker tonight is Greg Epstein. He is the humanist chaplain at Harvard University and MIT. He's the author of Good Without God, What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe. And he's the author of the soon-to-be published Tech Agnostic, How Technology Became the World's Most Powerful Religion and Why It Desperately Needs a Reformation. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Greg Epstein.
Thank you, Hemen, and thank you, Sarah, Sasha, and all my friends on the call. 2 paragraphs from my book, Good Without God, from 15 years ago. Humanism is a bold, resolute response to the fact that being a human being is lonely and frightening. We humanists take one look at a world in which the lives of thousands of innocent children are ripped away each year by hurricanes, earthquakes, and other acts of God, not to mention the thousands of other fundamental injustices of life. And we conclude that if the universe we live in does not have competent moral management, then so be it. We must become the superintendents of our own lives. Humanism means taking charge of the often lousy world around us and working to shape it into a better place, though we know we will not ever finish the task. In short, humanism is being good without God, an affirmation of the greatest common human value, the desire to live with dignity, to be good. But humanism is also a warning that we cannot afford to wait until tomorrow or until the next life to be good, because today, the short journey we get from birth to death, from womb to tomb, is all we have. And finally, 2 sentences from this week. Humanists must do more to fight for the human rights of all, to stop injustice, bigotry, and even genocidal campaigns waged in our names. So let's come together and donate and volunteer to become one of the core constituencies in Harris and Walz's diverse coalition, so we can help more and even pressure our leaders to build a better world for all human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. As Greg was saying, there's a lot of people on this call, and not everyone necessarily shares every single value in a big tent. That's the beauty of humanism. We are like organizing cats, it is said. But change begins when you elect people who are receptive to reason and gives us the environment from which we can organize. And with that, let me introduce you to Sasha Sagan. She is the author of Small Creatures Such as We and host of the podcast Strange Customs. And not only will she speak, she will introduce us to a special guest as well.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and I'm so delighted to be with you all tonight. I mean, sick with anxiety about the election, but delighted nonetheless. Especially Congressman Raskin and Congressman Huffman, both of whom I admire so much, and the aforementioned special guest, my brilliant mom, who I get to introduce soon. Part of why I'm so grateful to be here is that when I was young and beginning my life as a person who participated in politics, I turned 18 on the day of the 2000 election. It was an extremely dramatic experience. But we would always used to hear the phrase values voters, referring usually to very conservative, very devout, right-wing section of the electorate. It was as if the rest of us weren't voting on our values, as though valuing science, the environment, social justice, equal rights, equal access to healthcare are somehow unworthy ideas to build a philosophy and a worldview upon. And I feel it is high time that we make our values known. There is something antithetical to authoritarianism and xenophobia in humanism. Maybe tens of thousands of years ago, when we lived in small bands and understood so little about our universe, about our world, about ourselves, maybe then there was some advantage to this trait. But the cosmic perspective has given us a village of 8 billion and counting. We can see now that the divisions between groups are artificial and superficial. We have so much more in common than what divides us. And when we zoom out, we see so clearly that we are all in it together. The one thing I really do admire about religion, though I am not a believer, is the way it forms communities that come together to celebrate and in times of need. This is a time of need for our community, for our country, for our village of 8 billion and counting. So get involved, sign up to Phone Bank, to volunteer for the Harris Waltz campaign. Not only does it help us cross the finish line in those swing seats, but it feels so good to put our values into action, I promise. Now I get to introduce one of the two people who instilled me with said values, my beautiful mom, Andrian. She served as the creative director of NASA's legendary Voyager Interstellar Message. She co-wrote the original Cosmos series with her late husband, my sweet dad, Carl Sagan. And together they co-authored several books, co-created the motion picture Contact. She wrote and directed and produced Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey, more recently, for which she won the Emmy and Peabody Awards. Cosmos Possible Worlds is both the title of her third season and the companion book she wrote. Mom?
Daughter, I am so proud of you and so overwhelmed with a feeling of admiration and love that I've almost forgotten what I wanted to say. Like you, and so many of us, I have found myself very fearful about the possible outcome of the election. And I've been trying of late to focus more on what the outcome that we all devoutly hope for could mean to us, what it could mean to our world, what it could mean to the people in Ukraine with their backs against the walls, fighting tonight, what it could mean to our daughters and granddaughters to know that being female is not a disqualification, what it could mean to those of us who love reason and science and openness and free expression, and to live without censorship and to live without superstition. All of those dreams that we have, think of how much more confident we would be about our future, about the environment. You know, we have lived through, and I certainly don't need to tell this community of reason what it was like to live through those 4 years and what it could be like to have a president we admire and who has the qualifications and the achievements that are necessary to take such an awesome responsibility. So in your donations, in your giving, in your support for Kamala Harris and Walz, please reach deeply into those pockets and support the other Democrats that we need to win in order to make this victory meaningful. So I want to thank you so much for being part of this evening. It gives me a great deal of hope. And it's not that I think that this election will be the last time we have to work and struggle and fight for the things we believe in. But we have the opportunity right now to fight for something that will mean that in the aftermath, we can hope for the future that our daughters and our sons and our grandchildren devoutly deserve. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you.
Thank you so much, and such inspiring words. And remember, in addition to donating and volunteering, which you should do, remember that nothing is more powerful than you talking to the people you're close to and telling them how you are voting, that you are voting, why you urge all of them to vote as well. Nothing is going to change the barometer of the election more than your own personal testimony. And as non-religious people, isn't that something we love to do? Tell people about our opinions. With that, let me introduce our next two speakers. They include, first, Representative Jared Huffman. He represents California's 2nd Congressional District, which spans from the Golden Gate Bridge all the way north to the Oregon border. He's been in Congress since 2012, and he is the co-founder of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, which launched in 2018. This year, he launched the Congressional Task Force to Stop Project 2025. And speaking with him is Dr. Michael Mann. Dr. Mann is the Presidential Distinguished Professor in the Department of Earth and Environmental Science at the University of Pennsylvania. He's also the director of the Penn Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media. Congressman Huffman and Dr. Mann, the floor is yours.
Well, Hemant, thank you so much. And I'm really honored to share this time with Dr. Michael Mann, who is the most brilliant climate scientist that I know. And here I am with a political science degree. I do not have a PhD in astrophysics like Michael here. But Dr. Mann and I do have one credential in common. We are both proud recipients of the Humanist of the Year Award. Right. And perhaps that common humanism gives us a basis to have this conversation. I could, by the way, gush about the rest of this fabulous lineup for quite some time, but let me just say it's a real honor to be in this rarefied air. I am fired up to win this election, to save our secular democracy, and to get to work with a Harris-Walz administration on keeping this planet livable for our kids and grandkids. And I'm also really proud of this secular community for stepping up. You know, humanists and our fellow religious skeptics are the fastest growing and one of the largest religious demographics in this country. We have far greater numbers and should have more political influence than the extremists who want to impose their religious views and determine all of our rights and drive our policies and institutions in a big, diverse, secular democracy. We can't let that happen. So it is time for us to organize and to take our place in the political arena, because this country, and I think Dr. Mann would agree, this planet needs humanists. So if I could, I'd like to kick off and kick it over to Dr. Mann by focusing on what's at stake for the climate on November 5th. Again, with my political science degree, Dr. Mann, it seems to me that we have record high levels of carbon pollution that are continuing to get worse. We know we have to reduce global carbon pollution to net zero by mid-century in order to keep warming to around 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is still pretty bad, but maybe not catastrophic. And so it seems to me that we're in a race both against carbon pollution and time, and that winning slowly is the same thing as losing as we consider this choice between Donald Trump and the Project 2025 agenda of rolling back the IRA and taking us out of the Paris Agreement again and building all kinds of new fossil fuel infrastructure that will lock in decades of additional carbon pollution, or a Harris-Walz administration where we're still going to have our work cut out to drive bold climate policy, but at least they accept climate science and want to keep working and building on the progress we've achieved so far. Seems like night and day to me. Do you see it the same way, Dr. Mann? And again, it's an honor to be with you.
Yeah, well, the honor's mine, Jared. It's great to share the stage with you and so many heroes of mine who are part of this call today, both Ann Ryan and Sasha Sagan, of course. I can feel the connection with one of my great heroes, Carl Sagan, tonight in this virtual room. And I think he would frame things very much the way you have. We are at a juncture. He, back in the late 1990s, Carl sort of foresaw a potential future. He saw a dystopian future where, we give in to superstition and anti-science and pseudoscience. He feared that we would arrive at such a place, and we are there now. We are at a pivot point. We are at a hinge point. This is a fork in the road, because there is a future that's still possible that you allude to, where we take the actions necessary to preserve our planet for future generations, for our children and grandchildren. That's still a possible future, a future where we keep warming below 1.5 Celsius, 3 degrees Fahrenheit warming of the planet. Beyond that level of warming, we start to see far worse consequences. And look, dangerous climate change is already here. Just look at what we've witnessed over the last several weeks with Hurricane Helene and Milton, and the tremendous death and destruction. And there are already studies that have come out that show that, for example, the flooding from Helene was 50% more because of human-caused warming than it would otherwise be. That means there are people who perished, hundreds of people who died in that one event, because of the amplified effects that climate change is having on these extreme weather events. So dangerous climate change is here, but we can keep it within our adaptive capacity if, as you say, we act with urgency. We reduce carbon emissions dramatically over the next 10 years, bring them down to zero by mid-century. That is still possible. The obstacles aren't physical, and they're not technological. At this point, they are entirely political, and political obstacles can be overcome. But that's the choice we face. And it couldn't be a more stark choice, because on the one hand, we have Kamala Harris, who will continue with the progress that we've made under the current administration. We need to do much more, as you say, but at least we're on the right path, and we're making progress, and we're starting to bend that carbon emissions curve downward. That's one choice. The other choice is where we go backward. We eliminate all of the progress that we have made for decades, and the U.S. cedes its role as leaders. If we don't lead on this issue, then the rest of the world isn't going to come to the table. We are the world's largest legacy polluter. If we don't lead, if we don't take action ourselves, then we will fail to achieve the global action necessary to avert climate catastrophe. So that's the choice. It couldn't be more stark. That's why it's so important to turn out and vote for Democrats all the way down the ticket, of course, for Harris and Walz, but also we need a Democratic Senate. We need a Democratic House if we are going to make any progress on climate and any of the other things that we all care about.
Yeah, here. A little more about the connection between humanism, sort of a fact-based, science-based worldview, and climate action. The way I see it, it's a straight line. If you accept science and want to do critical thinking to make your public policy, you have to be a climate hawk. You have to step up. And if you believe that this is all there is, as Greg Epstein said in his humanist invocation, that we won't have do-overs in an afterlife, that thoughts and prayers are not going to help us, then there's a real urgency, an imperative for us as humanists to do what we can to face this crisis. How do you see it from your humanist perspective, Doctor?
Yeah, I see it the same way. I mean, it's about science and reason. It's about, nobody else is going to come in here and save us. It is up to us to take the actions necessary to preserve the only planet. And of course, one of the things that Carl spoke so eloquently about was sort of the quest for extraterrestrial life and looking for other life forms in the universe and wondering, why we're not hearing from them. Does that tell us something about the nature of civilizations to self-destruct? It's up to us. We can choose not to self-destruct, but we are at that pivot point, as I said, and appealing to, a deity, a god, whatever you want to call it, no other entity is going to come to save us. The only way we are going to address the climate crisis is by changing our behavior, getting off fossil fuels, moving towards renewable clean energy, creating a cleaner economy, helping the rest of the world along so that they don't have to make the same choices that we made in doubling down on a fossil fuel driven economy. So it's up to us. In the humanist perspective, I think, very much frames it that way.
And Dr. Mann, I think you and I both welcome allies who come to climate action by way of religious beliefs or interpretation of scripture or any other thing that gets them there.
Right.
But I think you would agree it's important to give them a foundation of science as well, because the truth is people are leaving religion in droves. So it is far more durable and certain to make sure that people understand when it comes to this climate crisis. Thank you for whatever religious faith may bring you into an interfaith coalition, but science has to be the foundation. And what is at stake in terms of the choice between the Harris-Walz ticket and a second Trump presidency when it comes to basic science? I'll just let you close us out with that. And then I want to say a few nice words about my colleague, Jamie Raskin, who I know just joined us.
Yeah, well, we do need allies wherever we can find them. And again, I'll appeal to, the great Carl Sagan. He recognized that and he reached out to religious leaders. He understood that we have common values that we share and we can work towards some of the same goals. And, in the end, whether it's religion or spirituality or just a sense of the awesome gift that we've been given, that we, the laws of physics and chemistry and biology are enough to explain why we're here, what maintains our home, our planetary home, what allows us to continue to live. And it sheds light on, what I call my latest book, Our Fragile Moment. We are at this very fragile moment where we are potentially leaving this sort of envelope of climate variability during which we develop the infrastructure that, supports 8+ billion people on the planet. That infrastructure was built for a climate that is disappearing. And if that climate disappears, then suddenly it really calls into question whether we can continue to support a global civilization of the sort that we find today. So again, we don't need to appeal to religion. We can find cause in the physics, chemistry, and biology of our earthly home in justifying the actions that are necessary and voting for politicians. It's the most important thing we can do, which today are Democrats who will actually take the actions necessary to preserve this planetary home for us and future generations.
Thank you, Dr. Mann, for all your leadership, for reminding us that as much as we know about this vast universe, this is the only place for sure that sustains intelligent life and Republicans. So we had better take good care of it. And with that, I see he hasn't yet animated, but my dear friend Jamie Raskin has joined us, and it is time to hand off to him. I will let Hemet do that honor officially, but I just want to say, by way of this segue, that I founded the Free Thought Caucus in Congress. I work a lot on church station and making sure public policy is based on science and fact and critical thinking. There is one person in the United States Congress who is my go-to ally on all these things, who was my wingman in standing up this little Free Thought Caucus that now has 24 members and is the place to do serious work on defending our secular democracy. And that person is the great Jamie Raskin, who just materialized on your screen. Hemet, if you want to go through other parts of his resume, you're welcome to do it. But I see that he just appeared, and I'm going to hand off to my great friend, Jamie.
Hey, Jared, thank you so much. Thank you for being our essential, indispensable rabble-rouser for the Enlightenment in the 21st century, and for rocking the House and the Senate with the Free Thought Caucus. It is my favorite organizational affiliation and identification. We have the most fun, we have the best arguments, and we have the funniest jokes. Maybe I'll start off with the joke, if that's all right with you guys, because this is how we usually kick it off in the Free Thought Caucus. But St. Peter's in heaven, and he's walking down the hallway, and he passes God's office, and he peeks his head into God's office, and God's got his head in his hands like this. And St. Peter says, God, what's wrong? You look really upset. And God says, I am really upset. I'm in love with an atheist, and she doesn't even know I exist. There you go. A joke for you guys. Oh, I'm getting some laugh notations coming up on the screen, so they liked it. Jared, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you all for being here. It's all about the science. I got to say, I was elected to Congress the exact same night Donald Trump was elected to Congress. And it wasn't quite what I was expecting, to tell you the truth. And when we got in January, the very first bill that was sent to us by the new administration was to cut $4 billion from the NIH budget. Now, I'm the congressman from NIH. Bethesda and Rockville are in my district, along with a lot of other great scientific installations, including NOAA, the National Weather Service, NIMH, the FDA is in my district. I've got a whole bunch of them. And so I had to go to war immediately to defend NIH and to defend our budget. And I got up and I said, how could this new administration want to cut the funding that is necessary for the doctors and scientific researchers who are trying to get to the bottom of all of the killer diseases of humanity, like cystic fibrosis and multiple sclerosis and breast cancer and lung cancer and malignant narcissistic personality disorder. They had funded 3 projects into the research of malignant narcissistic personality disorder. But in any event, we created a bipartisan, nationwide, multi-state coalition to defeat these efforts to cut science funding. And we ended up increasing the NIH budget by $3 billion rather than cutting it by $4 billion, if my memory serves correctly. And so the fight for science is the fight for public health. It's the fight for medical research. It's the fight for excellence in public policy. It's the fight for education. And as Dr. Mann was just observing, it is the fight for the preservation of the human species on Earth because of climate change. I remember Donald Trump tweeted out very early on in his tenure, he said, climate change is a hoax perpetrated on the Americans by the Chinese. And I tweeted out, no, Donald Trump is a hoax perpetrated on the Americans by the Russians. And that seems to be more and more true every single day. Climate change is real. Climate change has been verified and authenticated. I remember I had a colleague, Jared, I don't know if you remember him, named Lamar Smith. And I'm a middle child. I like to bring people together. It's all about birth order. I don't know if you've read Frank Sulliway's book, Born to Rebel. I recommend it highly to all of you scientists and humanists out there. But anyway, I've always tried to make bipartisan connection with people. And when I first got in, I had this friend named Lamar Smith from Texas and from, it's the district that's now represented by Chip Roy. But in any event, he was the chair of the House Committee on Science and Technology. So I thought, this guy will be my friend. And he was very, very nice, a lovely guy. He actually is not from Texas. He was born in Boston. He grew up in Boston as a Christian Scientist. His family was very close to Mary Baker Eddy's family, the founder of the Church of Christian Science. But anyway, he made his way to Texas and then became chair of the Science Committee. So one day we were sitting in the Judiciary Committee where I got to know him. And I said, Lamar, we can disagree about abortion rights. I know we're going to, and we can disagree about tax rates for big corporations. I know we're going to disagree about that. But look, one thing on climate change, you guys have got to get serious, because this is the fate of humanity that is in the balance here. And he said, well, Jamie, he said, you got your scientists and we got our scientists. And I said, like, that's not how science works. It's not rival party teams, you know? And so we were seated at a computer, and I said, let's go to the great scientific installations in Maryland's beautiful 8th District. And so I went to NOAA and I went to FDA and went to NIH. And I said, look, all of them have a whole section on climate change and how it's serious. It's just a dagger at the throat of humanity. And they've got to incorporate it into all of the work they're doing. And he said, and I just said, all the professional scientists agree. It's not a question. So he said, well, I don't want to get in a big fight with you. But he said, but let me tell you this about professionals. He said, professionals built the Titanic. Amateurs built Noah's Ark. Okay. And it took a moment for that to sort of sink in, what he was saying there. I said, wait a second, are you saying you want an amateur flying you back to Texas this weekend? And by the way, I think that what happened with the Titanic was not design error. I think that was human error. In any event, are you saying you just want 2 members of our species to survive? Is that your point about Noah Ark? But in any event, he was the best of them. And I realized, you know what? Like, we should reach out. We should constantly be trying to move people and educate people. And actually, I did send him some books about climate change. I sent him some Bill McKibben books. And one day he sent me an email back. He said, Jamie, check out these 2 articles. You'll find them interesting. One article said Lamar Smith changes tune on climate change. And I think it was in the Dallas Herald. And he'd basically made a speech saying he was willing to accept that the climate was in fact changing radically, had been destabilized. He wasn't sure if it was human causes, because I don't think he conceded that humans could have any impact on something as celestial and divine as the climate. But anyway, he acknowledged there was a problem and we needed to respond to it wherever the cause was. And I was amazed. And then I clicked on the other article and it said Lamar Smith announces his retirement. So he obviously felt like he couldn't actually become a climate science positive member. And he retired. And then he's replaced by Chip Roy, who's another climate denier. And anyway, so I realized, you know what? We're not going to be able to convince these people in time. We have to beat them. And that means we got to organize, we got to mobilize. If we had a national popular vote for president, it would be easy. If we had popular vote for Congress without gerrymandered districts, it would be easy. We've got millions and millions more pro-science, pro-reason people in the country. Hillary beat Trump by more than 3 million votes, even when she lost in the Electoral College in 2016. Biden beat him by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College in 2020. We're adding 14 million new voters, overwhelmingly young voters, and new citizen voters. They have no interest in the bile and the poison that Donald Trump has to sell with his accomplices over on that side. Yeah, so we're going to have a massive popular mandate, but we've got to deal with the Electoral College arithmetic, and we got to deal with the gerrymandered districts, and we've got to compensate for their ability to use voter suppression tactics and gerrymandering of the districts, state and federal districts, and right-wing judicial activism and the filibuster and everything they're using to wall off the democratic process from popular participation. We've got to compensate for that through massive organizing and mobilizing people and making sure everybody goes out and votes at every level of the ballot, and make sure that the young people are registering and that they understand what the stakes are, and they need a voter plan of exactly where they're voting, when they're voting. Is it early voting they're doing? Is it mail-in balloting they're doing? Are they going on election day? Everybody needs a voter plan. So appoint yourselves your precinct masters on your block and your family, and make sure everybody goes and does it. Tell the young people what we teach the young people in Democracy Summer. Everything you need to know about voting in 2024 is everything you need to know about driving. If you want to go forward, you put it in D. If you want to go backwards, you put it in R. That's all they need to understand. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with the words of the great Tom Paine, who's an inspiration to Jared Huffman and to me. You know, he got over here in 1774, 2 years before the American Revolution. He fell in love with the promise of America. He said if this land could live up to its values and its principles, it would become an asylum to humanity. Not an insane asylum, mind you, okay? A place of refuge for people seeking freedom from political and religious and economic oppression from all over the world. And then Paine wrote Common Sense, by which he meant the sense we have in common if we're willing to use our other five senses in order to reason together and use rational process rather than church doctrine and dogma and what we would call today propaganda, disinformation, fake news, all of that stuff. And that ignited the American Revolution, but it was still a tough year because, as is recorded in a wonderful new book I'm reading by H.W. Brands called The First Civil War, the country was split down the middle. Half of the people were loyalists to the crown. And they said, you can't beat the kings and the queens and the monarchs and the fusion of church and state, and you can't beat church superstition and the crusades and the inquisitions and the witchcraft trials. That's just the fate of humanity. And the other half said, no, let's gamble with Tom Paine and Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, and let's go with consent of the governed and life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Let's try to spell out the freedoms and the rights of the people, and let's have the people govern with no nobles, no titles of nobility, no kings and queens, no czars and no emperors, but people who are just public servants, faithful to the public experiment. But of course, on the liberal side, everybody's really nervous. Everybody's like, you know, have you checked the polls? Oh my God, the polls. And everybody's really upset. And, you know, what's the message and who's the messenger and all that stuff. Tom Paine wanted to write a pamphlet to give people courage and strength and hope. And he wrote this beautiful essay called The American Crisis. So I just want to quote a little passage for you. I'm going to update the language pursuant to instructions from Nancy Pelosi, who said Tom Paine was a feminist, that he was fighting for women's suffrage in the 18th century, as well as an abolitionist in the 18th century. But anyway, in The American Crisis, he said this. He said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country. But everyone who stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. Let's make that victory ours in 2024. The humanists and rationalists of the world, thank you for what you're doing with your hearts and your minds. Go out and get votes every single day. That's the message right now. Just go get us votes. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much. Do you know how dispiriting it is to have to follow Representative Raskin? But I so appreciate everything he said. Thank you so much. You heard what Representative Raskin said. Have a voting plan. I live in Illinois. It's a state where mail-in voting and early voting is very easy to do. I'm done. I can spend now until Election Day helping other people vote. If you are watching this, make your election plan. As he said, get to the voting booth as soon as possible so you don't have to wait until November 5th. And then, as you are seeing in the links, volunteer, donate. Let's make sure other people around us can do the same thing. Okay, now, next up, it is such a pleasure to introduce you to Sarah Levin. She's the co-founder and executive director of Secular Democrats of America. She is the reason we are all here tonight. She's also an atheist and open humanist who is on the Democratic National Committee's Interfaith Council, giving us a seat at the table, which is such a big deal and something I didn't think I could ever say several years ago. She's also the founder and principal at Secular Strategies, a consulting firm specializing in secular policy and non-religious Americans. I don't say this lightly, and I don't say this with hyperbole. There are very few people in our broad movement that I truly admire, but Sarah is without a doubt one of the best, and such a pleasure to introduce all of you to her.
Thank you, Hammond. That's so kind of you. I'm so proud and honored to bring together all of our incredible speakers today to rally support for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. But more than anything else, this event is about you, the folks tuning in. You are the ones who can make a difference in this election by donating your time and chipping in what you can. So if you haven't already, please click the links in the chat and sign up to volunteer and donate. When you sign up using these links, you're not only supporting the future of our democracy, you're also bringing visibility to the non-religious community. A lot of the work that we do at Secular Dems is advocating for full inclusion of our community in the Democratic Party. We envision a world where candidates are eagerly seeking the endorsement of secular Democrats, where local humanist and atheist community groups become a go-to campaign stop, where our community has a seat at the table, like Hemant was saying, when our party is making key decisions about its platform and its messages on issues that we care deeply about. And here's two reasons why all of that is really important. First of all, we have a unique perspective on issues that is valuable. I hope you've noticed so far on this call, and you'll continue to notice that the way that we think about climate, about reproductive rights, about LGBTQ rights and democracy is unique to our secular worldview. When you don't believe in gods or an afterlife, there is a certain urgency in this one life and in this one planet that we have that motivates us to take action. So, contrary to the idea that we're some kind of political liability, our inclusion is actually, I would argue, a net positive to the Democratic coalition. The other reason that this work is important is that, of course, in a representative democracy, we should be seeing a whole lot more openly non-religious people running and winning public office. We are at least 28% of Americans are non-religious, but we're still not seeing that kind of representation. We're still underrepresented, but that is changing thanks to the leadership of people like Congressman Huffman, the only open non-theist in Congress, Representative Rabb, who you're going to hear from next. But all of that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Elected officials and candidates need to know that the community will show up for them, just like you are right now. A huge part of Congressman Huffman's story of coming out as a humanist, and he's shared this publicly, is connecting with the folks at the Center for Free Thought Equality, which is the advocacy arm of the American Humanist Association. Having that support of our community at that time was critical. And the same goes for the candidates that have our Secular Dems affiliates in Pennsylvania, Nebraska, and Texas supporting them. By providing that grassroots support with our time and our dollars in the name of Secular Dems, we're showing candidates that if they stand with us, if they show up for us as strong advocates for separation of church and state, combating white Christian nationalism, if they do that, we will show up for them. So if you want to stay up to date on the atheist and humanist candidates running for office and get involved, you can become a member of the Center for Free Thought Equality for free. The link is in the chat. And if you want to get involved in Secular Dems, maybe even start one in your state, join us at seculardems.org. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over back to Hemant.
And by the way, as Sarah is saying, when it comes to openly non-religious candidates, there are more openly non-religious candidates on the ballot at the state level and the federal level this year than at any time in the past. And that is a direct, I think, correlation to the work you're doing. And so thank you so much for that. Let me introduce you all to State Representative Chris Rabb of Pennsylvania. He was first elected in 2016. He is a father, an educator, a social justice activist, and an author. He wrote the book Invisible Capital: How Unseen Forces Shape Entrepreneurial Opportunity. Representative Rabb, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Hello, fellow heathens. From Philadelphia, I bid you a good evening. I'm really honored to be on with so many amazing people. Congressman Huffman, who I got a chance to hang out with recently, the incomparable Sarah Levin, and Dr. Michael Mann, who is just 7 miles away from my district in Northwest Philadelphia. humble brag, I represent the bluest dot in the most pivotal state, battleground state in the United States of America. That is the 200th legislative district. I'm in my 4th term. I also am on the ballot on November 5th. And my first election night was the same as Representative Raskin's when what's his name, the orange one, was elected. And it's been quite a wild ride. I am very proud to be a part of this community. I have joked that I have been a closeted agnostic, but the closet door is made out of glass. So when I took office, when I was inaugurated in January of 2017, I proudly swore on very old Constitution, U.S. and Pennsylvania state Constitution, and have done so ever since, and will be doing so on the first Monday of January when I'm reelected, and hopefully that will be along with President Kamala Harris and Vice President Tim Walz. There is a diversity of folks on this Zoom call. There's a diversity of folks who will be showing up to vote for our next president. And that diversity has value. Some people are voting for Harris and Walz. Some people are voting against Donald Trump. And of course, there are folks who are doing both. Irrespective of why you come out to vote and get others to do the same, we need to hold whomever is in office to account. I am much more confident that we can hold a President Harris to account versus the Orange Menace. And part of that, it will ensure that we will not devolve into theocracy, and that we will value the separation of church and state. We will value science, but so much more, because science can be used, it can also be misused. And as someone who descends from 16 great-great-grandparents who were born across 6 states, all where slavery is the state law, I understand the value of struggle and believing in things that very few people believed and thought could ever change. So if we could get rid of the peculiar institution, which created extraordinary financial wealth for the 1%, we can do anything. I represent a majority Black district that has a very active Jewish population, a very active Muslim population, and a humble and confident secular community as well. In fact, the only mosque in my district used to be a church, which used to be a synagogue. I also represent a neighborhood that inspired the term white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So for my first 3 terms in office, I represented the whitest people in America. So I understand the value of diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of with regard to ethnicity, LGBTQ issues. I have a very active queer community, and I'm very proud of being able to be at the tip of the spear in terms of what happens on November 5th. Again, I have the largest number of registered Democrats and the highest voter turnout in my district. I take nothing for granted. So I'm constantly trying to get people to understand why it's important to vote, particularly those folks who do not easily get on the bandwagon for candidates who may be picking up steam, but who they have serious policy concerns with. And I say to them, voting for a candidate is not sending a love letter. It is deciding how you choose to hold people to account. And that's what we must do. And we can do it that much more meaningfully if we do it together, and we do it with authenticity and care and intentionality. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this moment. I'm thrilled to be part of this growing community of non-religious, aggressively heathen folks. I kid. I'm also a tree hugger, and I really enjoyed listening to my tree hugging colleagues in elective office, and of course, Dr. Mann. The reason I actually took office was because my grandmother was a radical Christian who was very progressive before feminism, before environmental justice. She was doing the work, and she helped make sure an incinerator was not put in her Black working class neighborhood while her white neighbors down the street got a free public pool. And that happened 2 years before I was born. And she was my most meaningful political mentor. And I have picked up the mantle and really focused on climate action, environmental justice, and have been so inspired by Carl Sagan and so many other people. I'm honored really to be on this call with Sasha and Ann and all of you. This is work we all must embrace together and understand that this moment is our moment. What are we going to do with it? So thank you all so much. I pass it back to Hemant.
Thank you so much, Representative Rab. And one thing that you point out that I hope people take to heart is that, yes, voting is important. Yes, donating and volunteering is so important. But you know what else is important? Running for office yourself, not necessarily for state rep or Congress, but for school board, for city council, for all those local races that sometimes get overlooked. And yet we all know how much impact they have when it comes to church-state separation and all the issues we care about. And with that said, let me introduce our next speaker, Raven Schwam Curtis. She is an educator who really explores the intersectional histories with a focus on Black and Jewish relationality. And I know that the topic she's speaking about is something that is near and dear to so many of you. It's one of the reasons so many of you are motivated to vote this time around, perhaps even more so than in the past, which is Project 2025, Christian Nationalism and Reproductive Justice. Raven, all yours.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the very warm introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Raven Schwam Curtis, and I'm so thrilled to be in community and conversation with fellow humanists who, like me, value reason, compassion, and justice in shaping our world. It's no secret to any of us that just 20 days out from the election, we're at a pivotal moment. The very foundation of this thing we're continually aspiring towards, called democracy, which is supposed to uphold separation of church and state, is under threat by the rising tide of Christian nationalism. I speak to you on this topic as a Gen Z, Black and Jewish woman who belongs to an interfaith family encapsulating Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish relatives. So if anyone can appreciate the many ways spirituality and religion can add value to one's personal life, it's me. But this issue is not about a difference in faith or belief systems. It's about power. About a movement that seeks to impose a singular, narrow worldview on all of us, disregarding our pluralistic values. A movement that seeks to weaponize a particular and myopic reading of Christianity to coercively implement laws that disregard what the majority of constituents want. A movement that feigns to be pro-life, but is simply pro-forced birth. A movement that is exacerbating the Black maternal mortality crisis by causing preventable deaths, as in the case of Amber Thurman, by creating structures that deny needed care. A movement that pounds its chest about religious freedom while disallowing the religious freedoms of other communities, including the Jewish community, that permits abortion, especially to protect the life of the parent. A movement that disallows freedom from religion, and a movement that is fundamentally undemocratic. Just days ago, thousands of Christian nationalists gathered in DC, notably on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, to further cement their political influence, advocate for the re-election of Trump, and peddle anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric. It should come as no surprise that a movement that bypasses the consent of the American people to forcibly impose its agenda is also a fertile breeding ground for multiple iterations of bigotry. The timing of this event speaks volumes. It is not coincidental, but intentional, and a reminder of how far they are willing to go to erode the feature that makes this country so beautiful, our diversity. This is why this election matters so much. Kamala Harris has consistently stood up for the protection of individual freedoms, including religious freedom, freedom from religion, and reproductive rights. She has been an advocate for keeping the church out of state affairs. She understands that a democracy works best when it respects all belief systems without elevating one above the others. Kamala Harris is a candidate who knows the power of humanism and empathy in governance. So as humanists, it's time to act. We need to mobilize, to stand up against those who want to tear down the wall separating church and state. This election isn't just about policies. It's about how we want to steer the continually unfolding experiment that we call the United States. Who do we want to be? Let's choose a leader who shows us time and again that she's fighting for freedom and liberty for all. Let's vote for Kamala Harris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raven. And I'm going to move it along here just so we're mindful of everyone's time. Our next speaker is Kaylee Whalen, who is a PhD student at UC Davis. And Kaylee has represented the LGBTQ plus community, the disability community, the Latin community as a public speaker. Kaylee has spoken twice at the Obama White House, and coolest thing any of us will ever have in our bios, in 2020, she represented the United States as Miss USA and Miss International Queen, the world's most prestigious transgender pageant. Kaylee, all yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I started my career at the American Humanist Association, helping ensure that we fundraised to support humanist values and opening checks and making thank you calls from many of you, including some of you on the call. And I now am, a scholar looking at how we can provide a sense of belonging through ritual, through, in very much the same vein as Greg Epstein and humanist chaplains are doing, to provide existential counseling and help and a place of belonging for transgender people denied that by a culture, by politicians saying that we don't exist or we don't deserve to exist, that our identities are not real. And they're not just saying that. Over 530 bills proposed in states across the country to take away transgender people's rights. 47% of transgender people in this country have said that they want to move to another state because they're afraid of living, in their state because their rights are being taken away. 39% of trans youth live in a state that's passed bans on gender affirming care. And behind me, I have an agender flag. I identify as non-binary or agender or transgender. And I thought of ironing the flag. But there's a little joke in the LGBT community that we don't iron our flags out of solidarity for all the people who have to keep the flag hidden away in a closet or in a drawer because they can't be out all the time. So I didn't iron it. But I am proud to be LGBT. I am proud to represent my community. I'm proud to represent disability justice community. I'm wearing a Starbucks Workers United pin. I'm a member of the AUW. Actually, we're organized as grad students under AUW. So I'm a labor organizer. These are things that one candidate does not support. Harris supports organized labor, supports LGBT rights, and we really need, as Representative Jamie Raskin said, we do need mass organizing to get people to vote. But we need it for more than just voting. Disability activist Lydia X.C. Brown, who ran for an election for the Maryland House of Delegates in 2022, said that with the Harris campaign, we are fighting for the conditions we will be organizing under, that we will need to continue to push Harris and Democrats and elected officials to make change for the community. It does not stop at the ballot box. So we need to be organizing at the Supreme Court for reproductive justice, for trans rights. We need solidarity with those affected by settler colonialism and Islamophobia. And we need to fight for trans children being denied the right to be themselves, the right to simply make decisions about their own lives with the support of their parents and their medical providers. And we have parents being told they'll be separated from their children if they support their trans kids. They're told that teachers and medical providers will be taught that they'll lose their jobs, or they'll be even prosecuted under law if they support trans kids. Again, 26 states have passed laws banning gender-affirming care. Nearly half the country is passing laws, and we need a stronger Democratic Party pushing back against this. I do not think the federal government is doing enough right now. And we need to push for the federal government to push back. And there is one government that will be open to this, and there's one that will not. So that is the message I want to share here. And again, you know, there was something mentioned earlier that in like earlier society, you know, we maybe had the supernatural beliefs, or I kind of want to push back on the idea that like we lived in a more primitive time, and like we're past the point of needing ritual, or even we're past the point of needing religion. We need a place for community and solidarity and existential meaning and belonging. And we have had many societies throughout history that have, you know, honored transgender people, that have honored cultural diversity. And that is something as a sociocultural anthropologist I've been researching. So it's not just about progress moving forward to some promised future, but also looking back to the past for societies that have been more open and accepting, and building that now. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much to Kaylee. And I just want to reiterate something Kaylee was saying. There are so many people out there who are counting on the election to go a particular way for Kamala Harris to win. Think about not just your vote, not just what you want, but think about LGBTQ people. Think about non-Christians or non-conservative Christians and immigrants and refugees and anyone who plans to be alive in 50 years, because they're going to need a planet that's not ravished by climate change. So again, you're not just voting because you want a particular outcome. You're doing it in the spirit of humanism for so many other people. So we have one final speaker tonight. I'm so honored to be able to introduce him. Andrew Seidel is a constitutional and civil rights attorney. He's the author of two fantastic books: The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, and also American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. He is my personal go-to guy when I have questions about pretty much anything involving the Constitution, and really one of the most well-spoken voices in our movement to talk about these issues. Andrew?
This is a pivotal and scary moment for our country. But I have hope, tremendous hope. And that's what I want to end us on tonight. As humanists, we value equality. In this election, we are standing up to a wave of white Christian nationalism that would drown this country in inequality. They want power and privilege and deference and legal favoritism at the expense of everyone else. We face a choice in this election. Do we continue to aspire to the unmet promise in the first words of our godless Constitution, that we the people means everyone? Or do we go back? I'm not going back. We're not going back. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are not going back. Trump and his Christian nationalists, and not all Christians are Christian nationalists, are working to privilege the chosen few, the straight, white, conservative Christian men. And believe it or not, that's one reason I'm so hopeful. There is a basic definitional truth at the heart of this fight. Their power-hungry aggression is growing our movement. Their wins, capturing the Supreme Court, overturning Roe versus Wade, the immunity decision, their wins swell our ranks. Every legislative and legal victory that they notch alienates more people, wakes more people up to the danger, and drives people away from them. Their power-hungry aggression is growing our movement. And just look at their policies, their rhetoric at Project 2025, which are full of just benighted and wildly unpopular ideas, right? They oppose marriage equality. 71% of Americans support it. They want to outlaw abortion. 85% of Americans think it should be legal. They want a nation of Christians like them. 73% of Americans are more welcoming of religious pluralism. They probably ban contraception too, but something like 91% of Americans are in favor. And those numbers terrify them. They are scared. They're scared because of you, because Americans are leaving religion behind, because, as evidenced by this call, and thanks to groups like Secular Dems, we are beginning to turn our demographic growth into political power. They're scared because of marriage equality, because every day we are closer to racial and gender and LGBTQ equality, because we elected our first Black president, and we are about to elect our first Black, South Asian, and female president. Christian nationalists are raging against the dying of their privilege. And while they are raging, we are working to meet the unmet promise in foundational ideas like we the people, meaning all the people. Equality, inclusion, and justice for all. Kamala Harris has dedicated her career to those ideals, right? Kamala Harris for the people. And as we continue to march toward that progress, knowing we still have a long way to go, Christian nationalists fight harder. They are not going to go gently. They are going to rage against the dying of their privilege. And Trump is the avatar for their rage, but he's also their last gasp, their last chance to seize power for this generation. If we work, we can win, because they fight only for themselves. They want supremacy. We want equality. That's why in the end, we can triumph. Not because our principle is inherently better than theirs, though it definitely is, but because we have the numbers. And elections are all about numbers. And though I am hopeful, I am not foolish, because hope, like prayer, is no substitute for hard work. Election day is in 3 weeks, 21 days, less than 500 hours away. Make the most of that time. Donate, volunteer, spend a few of those hours phone banking or text banking to get the vote out in one of those swing states. Do not waste your time doom scrolling or bemoaning the race on social media or looking at the polls. Click on that volunteer link right now. Then put your head down and do some damn work to help elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and a Democratic Congress. Vote all the way down the ballot. America will never be a Christian nation, because the moment it becomes a Christian nation, it will cease to be America. And this is the choice that we face in this election: Christian nationalism or America, because those two things cannot peacefully coexist. One will triumph. Put in the work now to make sure it's the right one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And he's right. Let's make sure none of us have any regrets on November 6th that we didn't do all we could. You know, as humanists, we cannot wait for a savior to swoop in and save us, but we are the ones we've been waiting for. So thank you so much for taking time out of all of your schedules to join us tonight. Thank you to Sarah and Secular Democrats of America for putting this together. And now all of you should figure out, what can you donate? How much time can you give? How are you going to volunteer? As Andrew was saying, we have 3 weeks until Election Day. Let's make every one of those days until then count. Let's volunteer. Let's talk to our friends and family and encourage them to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz so that we can keep moving in the right direction. As they say, we are not looking back. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.